Chapter 1088. Every Stormwind nobleman gasped in shock. This was the Stormwind Kingdom, the strongest human kingdom in the entire Eastern Kingdom. 20 years ago, the Stormwind Kingdom had been destroyed in the first battle of the Dark Portal. However, the fallen Stormwind Kingdom was miraculously recovered, and it took more than 10 years to rise again, becoming one of the most outstanding human kingdoms. Even the oldest human kingdom, Lordaeron, could not compare to Stormwind. Due to the plague of the Scourge, and the loss of a large number of people in the war, the once powerful Lordaeron was now just a second-rate kingdom. On the other hand, Stormwind was able to thwart the infiltration and conspiracy of the Cursed Church during the Third Battle of the Dark Portal due to Xueqi's prior arrangements. They managed to avoid the plague that broke out in the northern continent. Moreover, when Lordaeron fell, Stormwind took in a large number of refugees and invested them in the development of Stranglethorn Vale and the Swamp of Sorrows. Even after the war ended, those who stayed were given land. Queen Kalia of Lordaeron did not force her people to return. Overall, Stormwind's national strength did not decline. The previous king, Lang, was undoubtedly an excellent king, but that was all. Compared to his two incomparably dazzling and inescapable subjects, Ryan was just a mediocre person. Anduin Lothar, the leader of the Stormwind Royal Guards, the leader of the Iron Horse Brotherhood, the first commander of the Alliance, the strongest human warrior, and the last confirmed direct descendant of Thoradin the Great. His life could be said to be legendary. He had participated in the killing of the demon king Sargeras, who had possessed Mediva's body, killed the first chief of the Horde, fought head-on against Gromhel Scream, who had killed many famous Alliance knights in the Silverpine Forest, and led the charge in the Battle of the Scorching Plains when his side was at a disadvantage. His heroic story could be said for 3 days and 3 nights. Lothar was a model of chivalry. He was worshipped by countless knights and was destined to be sung for thousands of years. However, there was another person who was more famous than Lothar. That was Duke Marcus, the uncrowned king. On the military front, Xueqi had personally pierced through the chest of Mediv, who was possessed by Sargeras. He commanded the weak army of Stormwind to set fire to the 200,000 Horde soldiers. He miraculously saved 50,000 Stormwind elites on the floating ice island, and was appointed as the Alliance's vice-commander before the age of 20. After that, he led the army to fight for thousands of miles, from the Battle of South Shore where the sea was dyed red, to the Eagle Nest Mountain, to the northernmost Kuil Salis on the mainland, to the siege of the Horde in Rotterdam, and finally to the decisive battle on the Scorching Plains that made the name of the Lightning War resound in both heaven and hell. When the Horde's third-generation chief, Nizul, led the army to counterattack, it was his watchtower defense line that defeated the Horde's ferocious counterattack. During the Third Battle of the Dark Portal, he led the Alliance and defeated the main force of the Calamity Army in one fell swoop. In the end, the Calamity Army that had swept the Rotterdam Kingdom, the Dalajan Kingdom, the Rapids Castle Kingdom, and the Kuil Salis Kingdom was expelled from the Rotterdam Kingdom. What followed was the Battle of Mount Hyjal that almost destroyed the entire world of Azeroth. It was no exaggeration to say that in the field of military affairs, Duke Marcus was the god of war. Just based on this battle record alone, it was enough for Xueqi to be praised for thousands of years. But it was more than that. In the field of civil affairs, Xueqi was the greatest inventor and reformer. The new seeding technology, the mold-based construction of houses, the development of the marine economy in combination with the Murloc Nagas, the medical security system, the 6-year compulsory education, the economic construction of the Belt and Road Railway, and the continental integrated economic model that linked all railway and sea transportation. Many of his views and new ideas were fiercely opposed by countless people at the beginning. He used his unique vision and charisma to promote all of this in an almost tyrannical way. Time proved that everything he did and every policy he promulgated was correct. That was how the Stormwind, which had been completely destroyed by the war, was pulled into the Stormwind, which was extremely rich in resources today. His territory was already larger than the Stormwind, and even larger than many small countries. Rumors of his flirtatious exploits with several queens were spreading everywhere. No, it was no longer rumors. At least the 3 queens of Kurtiras, Lordaeron, and Alterac publicly announced that the person they loved was Xueqi. As long as Xueqi was willing, he would not hesitate to change the surname of the royal family to Marcus. However, Xueqi chose to be loyal, and like the other lords in the kingdom, he fulfilled his obligations as a vassal to the king of Stormwind. There was such a standard in the noble circle that was recognized all over the world. As long as a vassal paid taxes to the king on time and sent troops according to the strength of the territory during the war, he was a perfect vassal. Obviously, Duque's Marcus family did this impeccably. Therefore, for the nobles, Duque was also the embodiment of loyalty. Originally, it was said that Duque almost died because he was cursed in the Battle of Mount Hygel, and after he recovered, he participated in the secret mission of the Dragon of Time, Nosdormu, and was likely to die in the River of Time. Suddenly, there was news that he had returned. After all, Duque was a legend among legends, a living legend. The nobles had mixed feelings. They coveted the benefits brought by Duque, but they also did not want Duque to return, because the return of such a powerful Grand Duke was bound to reshuffle the power of the entire kingdom. Compared to Duque, even Bolvar for Dragon, the regent, had to step aside. As the ceremonial officer finished the roll call, an archmage dressed in a dazzling epic mage equipment appeared at the door of the conference hall. Every single piece of equipment on his body emitted a strong magical wave visible to the naked eye. Even though he had repeatedly suppressed the magical power of the equipment, the flowing light and vibrant colors still overshadowed the jewelry worn by the nobles. Half a step behind Duque were two vassals of Duque, Earl Edwin Van Cleve and Earl Reginald Windsor. Behind them were two beautiful women dressed in maid clothes, and one of them was an elf. Those who knew the inside story, of course, knew that one was Van Cleve's daughter Vanessa, and the other was the former follower of Prince Cuel Salus, Solarian. Not to mention the two important ministers signing autographs. Even the maids were heroic domain masters or radiant moon mages. Only Duque could be so extravagant. Every noble, whether marquis or dukes, bowed their heads in respect. Duque strode forward, but stopped in front of a beautiful black-haired female noble. "Hello, beautiful lady, may I, Duke Marcus, have the honor to know your name?" "Hello, Your Excellency Duke Marcus. I am Countess Katrana Anristo." Katrana performed a very standard and elegant ladylike bow. "Very good. I'll remember you." A mysterious smile appeared on Duque's face. Chapter 1089. Remember You. The entire meeting hall was instantly filled with a low and rude commotion. No one cared about this little bit of impoliteness. To many nobles, this was definitely something that the Countess of Anristo could be proud of. Just like the epic achievements of the legendary hero, Duke Marcus, in the aristocratic circle and even the commoners' daily conversations, if a lady was fancied by Duke, it could be regarded as a glory that could be bragged about for a lifetime. Once upon a time, because countless noble ladies had tried to climb into Duque's bed when he was just an ordinary noble, many nobles envied and hated Duque and slandered Duque's sexual orientation. Later, as Duque's female friends were exposed one by one, this group of nobles who were gossipy to death immediately changed the topic, and boasted that only women who could catch Duque's eye were the true top beauties in the world. Just look, Jaina, Elucia, Kalia, the three Windrunner sisters. All those who were related to Duque were all famous super beauties. Suddenly, Duque expressed interest in this new noble lady who had recently appeared in the circle of nobles in Stormwind. The noble soul of gossip was burning. The female nobles were envious. The male nobles were pounding their chests and stamping their feet because they felt that they had no advantage in front of the great hero and Grand Duke Duque. Apart from boasting that they had a slight advantage in terms of appearance, they all lost by a wide margin. Alright, this was just a small interlude. Although Bolvar, who had long been standing beside William, frowned at Duque's somewhat frivolous behavior, it did not matter. What happened next was the key. This was because the person Duque wanted to see was the King of Stormwind. This scene made many of the royal faction rather nervous because Duque's power was too great. King Lang had written more than one will before the war, appointing Anduin and Duque as regents for the young princes. The power of these two regents was beyond the imagination of outsiders. Anduin is my arm, and Duque is my brain. I trust them more than I trust myself. So, if they believe that my son does not have the right to be king, then they can choose another descendant of mine. If my bloodline is severed, then they have the right to hand over Stormwind to a more suitable person. They had the power to veto the Storm King. The power of these two regents was astonishing. What was even rarer was the fact that he had obtained the unanimous approval of King and Queen Lang, as well as the approval of the high-ranking nobles of Stormwind. At the end of the day, even Bolvar's position as the regent was actually given to him by Anduin. Obviously, even though they were both old Storm nobles, Bolvar's prestige was far inferior to Anduin's. The most obvious example was that Varian's son was named Anduin Rin. And after this little prince was baptized in the Church of Holy Light, his Christian name was impressively Duma, the first two words of Duke Marcus. Bolvar was also rather nervous now, because William, after his disappearance, he had become muddle-headed, just like a puppet. It was obvious that William was not suitable to be a king in such a state. If Xueqi announced that he was no longer a king, then Bolvar really could not find a reason to object. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Xueqi continued to move forward and arrived in front of the statue-like William, who was sitting foolishly on the throne. Seeing the beads of sweat on Bolvar's forehead, Xueqi smiled calmly. Phew! This smile made Bolvar, who represented the knights, secretly heave a sigh of relief. Unexpectedly, Xueqi did not kneel down on one knee or even bow. Instead, he bowed to Queen Tiffany, who was sitting on the throne beside William. This is, after bowing, Xueqi raised his head and said in a clear voice, "My apologies. I will not bow to a soulless body." Queen Tiffany's face instantly turned pale. William is just sick. The queen, who was supposed to have died in the riot of the Mason Brotherhood, was still fine because Van Cleef had followed Xueqi and Stormwind was not as chaotic as in history. Xueqi shook his head and said loudly so that all the nobles could hear, "No, this is not a sickness. His Majesty William Rin's soul is not in his body." Ah! A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. The commotion among the nobles could not be suppressed. After his disappearance and recovery, William had been like a fool. Almost all the nobles thought that William had been hit in the head and was suffering from a concussion. Who knew that Xueqi would publicly say that William's soul was no longer in his body? If someone else had said this, there would definitely have been a lot of doubts. However, Xueqi was the strongest person in the realm of mystery. What's going on? Bolvar was very agitated. He stepped forward and almost wanted to grab Xueqi's shirt to ask. Everyone knew that William's disappearance had nothing to do with Xueqi. At that time, everyone knew that Xueqi had gone to participate in Nozdormu's secret mission. However, Xueqi suddenly said that William's soul was no longer in his body. This was obviously a huge conspiracy. Xueqi shook his head. "I don't know, but I can confirm that this is a type of evil magic. The Burning Legion or the Calamity Legion." Bolvar lost his voice. "No. If I have to say what it is, I'm afraid it's more like the methods of the ancient gods." "Then, don't worry, Bolvar. I have never thought of abolishing His Majesty William Rin." Because, suddenly, Xueqi's aura became very mysterious, and a torturous aura surged out. "When I was floating in the river of time, I saw a fragment of William's glorious future." F***CK. Was it that ridiculous? He even saw the future. Alright, in theory, Xueqi had inherited it from Medivh. Medivh had already warned the various countries before the arrival of the Calamity Legion, which once again proved that Medivh was a torturous, no, a prophet. Now that Xueqi actually said that William would be very powerful, it was really hard for everyone to refute him. Xueqi turned his head and faced a large group of nobles. He raised his hands high and said, "I have always believed that humans are not born noble. If bloodline determines everything, then the great Anduin Lothar should be the ruler of the 7 human countries, and not choose to end his own bloodline." Xueqi's sudden statement caught the nobles off guard. Everyone was wondering what Xueqi was trying to do. Xueqi continued, "Whether a person is noble or not depends on his actions. Therefore, I think that His Majesty William, who has always been committed to building a better country and doing his best for the alliance, is a competent king. Therefore, as the subjects of His Majesty, what we have to do is to build a greater country in Stormwind when His Majesty is not around." Chapter 1090. If Xueqi deposed the king from the start, it would undoubtedly maximize the effect of establishing dominance, but it would also bring about another consequence, the division of power in Stormwind. Even if Xueqi put Anduin Rin on the throne, there would still be suspicions of narrowing the emperor to order his vassals. If he maintained the status quo, it would not disturb the core knights of Stormwind, nor would it alarm someone. With Xueqi being so easy to talk to, those guys who were ready to make trouble had no choice but to stop. After all, with Xueqi's identity and status, with such a huge foundation and the support of external forces, even if Xueqi told the Rin family to get lost and he himself became the king of Stormwind, it would not be surprising. Xueqi was advancing by retreating. Since he had given up on the most crucial issue of royal power, he would definitely reap the benefits in other areas. This was something that the nobles with a little political knowledge would understand. But no one would have thought that Xueqi's next bombshell would be so shocking. Like the most passionate speaker, Duque's hands were raised high like a conductor of an orchestra, stirring the heartstrings of the nobles. Everyone! Are you satisfied? Satisfied? Satisfied with what? Living in a castle that looks magnificent on the outside, but is actually built on quicksand, enjoying prosperity that can be destroyed at any time, and the taxes of your subjects, even if you will die in a few years. Even so, are you satisfied? What? Destroy? Again? Most of the nobles' faces were covered with makeup, but now, under the heavy makeup, their faces were as pale as they looked. Die. Die. No. Of course not. Death and the loss of inheritance were almost the things that the nobles feared the most. After experiencing 3 battles at the Dark Portal, is there anyone who still dreams of eternal peace? If there is, then let me give you a word of advice. Don't be naive. The demons of the Burning Legion have already set their eyes on this beautiful planet. There may be peace, but every subsequent peace will be extremely short. If you do not wish to be destroyed, then bring out your drive, bring out your dignity as a noble, and prepare for war. War. Where is the enemy? As the leader of the knights, Bolvar stood up without hesitation. Duque waved his hand to stop Bolvar. No. There's no rush. This time, I'm here to tell everyone that the era of nobles being able to watch the soldiers fight on the front line as if it had nothing to do with them as long as they send soldiers and pay them is over, while they safely have a party in the rear is over. When Duque said this, all the nobles in the meeting hall felt their hearts skip a beat. Obviously, Duque was going to use his ultimate move. I hereby formally request Stormwind to reform the tax system. In the future, all tax officials will be dispatched by the kingdom. Taxes are divided into national tax and local tax in proportion. The national tax would be paid directly to the state and controlled by the state. The land tax was collected by the lord and used for the lord's daily expenses as well as the construction of the territory. At the same time, all entrance fees and road tolls will be abolished. In terms of military affairs, greatly reduce the number of private soldiers that nobles can legally possess. Grand dukes can only have 1,000 soldiers at most, and so on. The disbanded soldiers and those who pass the physical examination will all be incorporated into the country's regular army. The rest will be reorganized into local garrisons and supported by the country's finance. In terms of armaments, all mines will be uniformly mined by the country. Every year, a guide price will be set based on the market price and economic returns will be given to the lords. At the same time, the lords have the obligation to allocate empty land near the main roads for the country to build various military facilities according to local conditions. In one breath, Duque threw out a combination of punches, directly shocking the nobles to the point of suffering internal injuries. All the nobles felt like they were about to faint. This was digging out the roots of the nobles. In name, taxes did not increase, but which nobles did not have their own private coffers? Every year, the taxes would be 10,000 gold coins. At most, they would report 3,000 gold coins, and then pay 3,000 as taxes to the king. Now that even the tax officials had been changed to the countries, that private coffer would be the first to be destroyed. In terms of military affairs, abolishing the private soldier system was equivalent to abolishing military power. In the future, any family soldiers would only be at the level of a guard of honor and would not even be qualified to rebel. In terms of armaments, the nobles who occupied the mountains as kings were forced into a dead end. In the past, those who had mines in their territories were like hens that laid golden eggs, practically earning money while lying down. There were even lords who secretly refined the mines themselves, forged them into weapons, and secretly sold them to the tribes. Now, no one could play any tricks. With such a reform, nominally, the territories still belonged to the lords, but there would be no profits or autonomy. This was simply the biggest subversion of the aristocratic system. A marquis named Launali exclaimed on the spot, "No! Even you, Grand Duke Marcus, do not have the right to announce the abolition of the aristocratic fiefdoms. This is the aristocratic norm set by Thoradin the Great. This is the cornerstone of the entire aristocratic world." Duque did not answer directly, but instead smiled strangely. "Sir Marquis, have you ever seen a big explosion that almost destroyed the world?" No. I have seen it. I just went to the ancient war 10,000 years ago and saw how the ancient Kalimdor continent exploded, exploding into today's Kalimdor and the Eastern Kingdom continent. Do you want me to show you some magic images? Although he said no, in fact, Duque had already started to show them with a wave of his hand. Well, I'm sorry to inform you that there will be similar catastrophes in the near future. Sir Marquis, even if Stormwind City is likely to be engulfed by lava, do you still want to tell me that the rules set by Thoradin the Great, which destroyed the Empire 2,000 years ago, cannot be changed? Even if the Lava Lord Ragnaros, who is sleeping in the burning steppes, is about to awaken and turn the entire southern continent into a sea of fire purgatory, do you still dare to say that it has nothing to do with us? The aristocrats' faces turned green, but they did not know how to refute. Duque's voice suddenly rose by an octave. Everyone! The times have changed. Relying on the contributions of our ancestors to enjoy the glory and splendor for 1,000 years is bound to be a dream. In the past 20 years His Majesty Lang Rin, and His Excellency Anduin Lothar have done so much for this country, carried out so many reforms, and built Stormwind City so strong together with everyone, not to give you the capital to be corrupt. Corrupt? Is it? Bolvar suddenly laughed bitterly. The kingdom had become extravagant, and it was not that he did not notice this change. But as a great aristocrat, he could not stop the aristocrats from indulging in gold every day, living the same luxurious life as before. It was only at this moment that he realized how great Duque's reforms were. The world is facing destruction. We do not need vermin. Aristocrats who claim to be the elites of the kingdom. You have no choice. Either you keep up with the changes of the times, or you fall behind. At this point, Duque's face revealed a murderous look. Of course. You can object. As long as you throw away the noble insignia on your chest and walk out of this door, your objection will take effect immediately. Chapter 1091. The nobles were shocked. They couldn't believe their ears. Duque, who had been missing for a long time, came back with drastic reforms and targeted at the roots of the nobles. Were the nobles still nobles without financial and military power? What right did the nobles have to do whatever they wanted in their own territories? Wasn't it just financial and military power? Almost all the respect and power were obtained from these two things. Now, without even informing them, he directly said that he would take back their power. This was killing them. They almost wanted to rebel on the spot. Unfortunately, no one dared. Compared to a peerless expert who killed the Demon King Sargeras and the Demon Commander Archimond, they were practically trash. All the nobles' military power combined couldn't even defeat one of Duque's fingers. If it was 20 years ago, when the nobles of the 7 human kingdoms were united, they might be able to summon external forces and teach Duque a lesson for daring to challenge the rules of the nobles' game. Unfortunately, when the Storm nobles suddenly thought about it, their mouths were filled with bitterness, as if they had been forced to eat **tea. Unknowingly, the world of the nobles had already collapsed from one disaster after another. Among the 7 human kingdoms, Stormguard had already been destroyed and had yet to recover. Dalajan had a completely different system. By the way, the current chairman, Ronan, was Duque's personal disciple. Gilnis was still surrounded by a group of werewolves, and no one knew if his kingdom had been destroyed. Apart from Stormwind, the nobles of the remaining 3 countries were basically wiped out. Alterac. After the second battle of the Dark Portal, the Horde conquered Broken Ridge, and even the nobles including Eden Pyreus were wiped out. Only Duque's bloodline was left. Although Elugia ascended to the throne, the old Duke Barov still stayed in the Marcus family's territory. The entire family and even the kingdom were in cahoots with Duque. Lordaeron. After Arthas's betrayal, the core nobles of Lordaeron were all wiped out. Only staunch local lords like Mograine were left, but they were all the most loyal knights. Kurtiras. During the third battle of the Dark Portal, the entire mainland fell, and all the nobles were wiped out. Only Queen Jaina was left. Alright, the problem was that the 3 queens mentioned above were all considered to be Duque's lovers by the nobles. Outside help? It was already good enough that Duque didn't drag the rest of the human kingdoms over to hold down the fort. How could he ask for reinforcements? Not only did they not have any external help, but they also could not defeat Duque, whose power was equivalent to that of a country's monarch. The nobles were truly aggrieved. Commotion. Both sides were embarrassed. For a moment, everyone wanted to find someone else to go against Duque. Amidst the countless, "I'm not as good as you," and "Do you think I'm an idiot" looks, the Storm nobles realized in despair that no one could do anything to Duque. Duque didn't even take out his staff. He just stood there with his hands clasped behind his back, demonstrating what it meant to be domineering with a smile. If looks could kill, then these useless nobles would have been killed on the spot, chopped up and fed to the dogs. Now, Xueqi was so domineering. You can object. I can ignore it. Just like that, he used an almost barbaric manner to declare his power and force. Silence. Do not erupt in silence. Die in silence. Just like that, Xueqi, with a silent smile, killed the noble's will to resist. Haha. Is there anyone else who wants to object? The gate is right there. Don't worry, as the regent of Stormwind, I have no intention of confiscating the property of those who object. After handing over the territory to the country, I will allow you to sell off the property in your territory. At the same time, I will allow you to continue to do business and live within the borders of Stormwind. Xueqi's attitude of, I'm giving you a gift, but you're not thanking me for it, almost drove the nobles crazy. Rage spread through every vein in their bodies, but they couldn't vent it. They were practically suffocating to the point of suffering internal injuries. Bolvar was dumbfounded at the side. He wanted to speak a few times, and even when the nobles he was familiar with sent him pleading looks, his heart softened a little. But after squirming a few times, he didn't say anything in the end. What reverberated in his mind was what the late King Lang had said to him when he was still alive. Bolvar. Xueqi's reforms, with our intelligence, we can't understand them. In fact, you and I are both mortals. We don't have Anduin's courage, nor do we have Xueqi's intelligence. So mortals should do what mortals do. Leave the rest to them. We only need to confirm that they are doing it for the good of the kingdom and the people. That's enough. That's right. The ones who were truly valued by the late king were Xueqi and Anduin. I, Bolvar, am just a person who keeps what I've accomplished. Because he knew the limits of his intelligence, Bolvar's loyalty to the House of Rin ultimately overrode the interests of these nobles. Xueqi forcefully suppressed Bolvar and the knights, and they didn't utter a word. The resolution, which was almost a disaster for the nobles, was passed just like that. As soon as the meeting ended, Bolvar couldn't wait to summon Xueqi. Almost as soon as he entered the secret meeting room, Bolvar asked, Xueqi, what are you trying to do? Bolvar, do you really not know, or are you just pretending? Stormwind has already decayed. Xueqi's expression turned cold, and he threw out a stack of petitions. I made so many reforms to make the entire kingdom rich, not to feed those vermin. Looking at the stack of petitions, Bolvar's eyes immediately closed in pain. You won't die if you don't court death. In the past, the lords controlled their territories. Even the king had to pay tolls to the lords when he opened a railway. Now that they were used to plucking feathers from the geese, and every train had to earn a sum of money, those nobles actually joined forces to besiege him, the regent, saying that they wanted to impose special tariffs on the supply trains that passed through their territories to the Overwatch Castle in the Cursed Land. Otherwise, they would stop the train every time it passed and check if there were any prohibited items. Other than that, the nobles made all sorts of noise because the land was privately owned. Bolvar, who abided by the iron law that the nobles' territories were not the king's for 2,800 years, could do nothing about it. However, he didn't think that Xueqi would immediately make a move upon his return. But this is too intense. This will cause the entire ruling class of the kingdom to collapse. Then let's change it to another batch. Even if we don't do anything, they will eventually perish under the enemy's attacks. The important thing now is whether we should destroy them, or let them continue to corrupt the entire kingdom, dragging the kingdom and even all of humanity into the abyss of destruction. Is it that exaggerated? What if I told you that the loss of Varian's soul was the plot of an enemy, and that enemy just so happened to be among the nobles? Bolvar's heart instantly froze. Chapter 1092. Bolvar was an extremely principled and strong-willed man. It was true that he was pained by the depravity of the nobles, but he was a knight loyal to the king first and a noble second. He clenched his teeth and said, As long as you have evidence, I will support you even if you have to wipe out all the nobles in Stormwind City. Xueqi, on the other hand, became relaxed. There's no rush. Compared to wiping out the vermin in the country, don't you think that William is more important? Bolvar's eyes immediately lit up. He pounced on Xueqi like a hungry tiger pouncing on its prey, grabbing Xueqi's arms tightly. You know where His Majesty's soul is? William's disappearance was the biggest stain on Bolvar's record as regent. It was the deepest humiliation. From the time William disappeared to the time he was found, he had become an idiot. Bolvar's heart was constantly tormented by guilt. The late king had handed William over to Lothar before handing him over to him. He had always been strict with himself and scrupulously abided by his duties as regent. Who would have thought that something like this would happen? If not for the fact that he had to support the country, Bolvar would have committed suicide long ago. Now that Xueqi had suddenly mentioned William's whereabouts, how could Bolvar not be agitated? Coincidentally, when I returned from the River of Time, I saw some fragments of William's future. Coincidentally, I returned from the new main city of the elves, Teldrassil, which was not far from that place. I did my best to confirm William's safety. He had lost his memory, but his body was in good condition. Wait, you confirmed that it wasn't His Majesty's soul? Bolvar was shocked. Then could it be that the His Majesty beside us is a fake? No, he's real too. William was unfortunate enough to be split into two by the evil magic of a certain existence. The cowardly and lazy person in the hole was him. The William on the Kalimdor continent was also him. Bolvar opened his mouth wide, stunned by this strange news. Why didn't you say so earlier? After entering the room, Xueqi had already set up a magic barrier to prevent eavesdropping, but he still made a shushing gesture. If I say that, won't the one lurking among the nobles realize that I've seen through everything? Who the hell is that guy? Bolvar gnashed his teeth. To think that a mysterious and powerful enemy had infiltrated right under his nose. This was definitely a dereliction of duty on his part. Xueqi patted Bolvar on the shoulder. Brother, your acting is too bad. I can't tell you, but you can rest assured and leave that guy to me. I believe you. I'll leave the domestic affairs to you. I'll personally lead the troops to fetch the other emperor back. At this moment, Bolvar was like a fanatic who was obsessed with Xueqi. His eyes were filled with stars. Xueqi also felt that he had gone overboard, but with Nozdormu's endorsement, no one could expose him. To be honest, even he himself felt that this statement was a little ridiculous, but Bolvar believed it 100%. Wait, William is not in danger. If you bring him back now, you'll only ruin his training. You said training? Yes, training. A hellish training. This is what William lacks. William is not bad, but the so-called not bad is only the standard of a mediocre king. He's not a wise king, and he's not good enough to carry the banner of the Alliance. Anduin and I have always had high hopes for William because he has the talent. Talent? Xueqi raised his head and looked at the ceiling. It was as if his gaze had pierced through the void and reached the river of history. There the two ancestors Lang and Anduin were smiling at him. I've always believed that talent determines the height a person can reach. To reach this height, hard training is essential. William has the talent to become the leader of the Alliance, but his youth was too smooth. Too smooth. Bolvar's gaze was a little lost. Think about it. The current chief of the tribe, Sal, has a noble background, but he spent his entire childhood and adolescence as a slave gladiator in the arena. He has to face life and death battles almost every day. On the other hand, he has a real understanding of human life, society, and culture. He has knowledge and wisdom that far exceeds the level of the orcs. Furthermore, the former chief of the tribe, Orgrim, has been secretly teaching him and imparting the tribe's spirit. That's why the current wise and outstanding chief of the tribe, Thrall, was born. Bolvar was silent. Xueqi was right. Compared to Thrall, who had gone through hardships and tribulations, William's life had been too smooth before he turned 20. At that time, King Lang had not been assassinated. Even though he had suffered the pain of the destruction of his country, he had Xueqi's support for internal affairs, Anduin's support for external affairs, and Lang's protection and guidance. William, who had not truly experienced life and death, was only a little better than a flower in a greenhouse. As a loyal subject, Bolvar was more eager than anyone to see his lord's growth and metamorphosis. All right, Xueqi, you've convinced me. But first, I have to ensure His Majesty's safety. Sure, but I won't allow you to go, not even the royal knights. Why? Bolvar roared. Please, that place is not for holy knights. The holy light on your bodies is even more dazzling than a lighthouse in the night. Even if you send ordinary knights there, those who only think of justice and loyalty will easily see the world as black and white, and mess things up. Bolvar understood Xueqi's meaning. All right. I'll let MI7 arrange for an elite team of rangers to go. Xueqi nodded in satisfaction. Coming out of the secret room, Xueqi sat in his personal carriage. The two important subjects, Reginald and Edwin, as well as the two maids Vanessa and Solarian, were already waiting there. As a Grand Duke, he still had to have the necessary extravagance. The carriage was very large, and each side was enough for one person to lie down comfortably. There were also many protective spells and anti-eavesdropping spells. Sitting opposite him, Edwin Van Cleef was the first to bow his head and admit his mistake. "I'm sorry, my lord. I didn't even know that a powerful enemy had infiltrated the kingdom. It's my fault." "Haha. Do you know who she is now?" "Her." Edwin immediately reacted, even though he was not absolutely sure. "Master, are you talking about Countess Enristo?" Xueqi revealed a mysterious smile. "Edwin, do you still remember Lord Presto?" In the carriage, the expressions of the other four people froze. Lord Presto, this name was not unfamiliar at all. Even Solarian, who was far away in Cuel Salis, had heard of it. The fallen ancient guardian, Nesario, had once pretended to be a human lord and infiltrated the alliance. He almost married Princess Kalia and was crowned king of Alterac. Chapter 1093. Edwin slapped his forehead in utter regret. This was a slap to his face. After all, he was in charge of the Marcus family's intelligence work. "It's not your fault. Enristo and Presto are very different in pronunciation and spelling." Xueqi wasn't spouting nonsense. After all, the common language in the world of Azeroth wasn't English. It was still an alphabetic system, but the letters, spelling, and pronunciation weren't the same. Windsor sighed. "I'm still thinking about how to dispatch troops if something happens to Stormwind City. But that's a dragon. Mortal force is meaningless. Reggie, don't move your main force. The Blackrock Beast men will run out of the burning steps and cause trouble soon. I'll leave those guys to you." "No problem." Windsor patted his chest, his eyes blazing with fighting spirit. He was 38 years old this year, the best age for a man. His martial skills hadn't declined, but he'd experienced 3 battles at the Dark Portal in one go. He was definitely an outstanding commander. Xueqi smiled. "Reggie, fight this battle as the general of Stormwind City. You'll get what you want." Windsor's eyes lit up frighteningly. Of course he knew what Xueqi was talking about. The Marshal's scepter. A marshal who wasn't even 40 years old. Just the thought of it was enough to make him go crazy with excitement. Isn't it just taking care of the Blackrock Beast men? Don't worry. If this was 20 years ago, Xueqi really wouldn't be able to rest easy. But after experiencing so much, Windsor was definitely trustworthy. Edwin brought the topic back again. "Who's coming this time? A female? Female? Could it be Onyxia?" "That's right. Too bad there's no prize." "What do we do?" "While she's still in human form, let's..." Vanessa made a throat-slitting gesture. Xueqi laughed. "Stop joking. Only when you cut her with your dagger will you realize that her seemingly delicate neck is actually 3 feet thick. TSK, are all giant dragons monsters?" Vanessa was indignant. Science could not explain why a giant dragon that weighed in tons would turn into a delicate woman that weighed less than 100 pounds after using the ultimate transformation spell. What else could Xueqi say about such a fantastical world? Solarian interrupted. "Then what do we do? Should he just wait like this? It doesn't seem to fit Master's personality." Solarian hadn't completely changed. After all, she hadn't spent much time with Xueqi. Xueqi didn't mind. He rested his chin on his left hand and rested his elbow on his knee. His right index finger tapped on the blue-dyed velvet cushion about 10 times rhythmically and smiled. "Solarian, you're right. Although waiting is in line with my status, the status of a mortal is meaningless to a dragon." At this point, a naughty smile appeared on Xueqi's face. "But since such a giant dragon doesn't play violence with us, and instead comes to the human world to play politics and conspiracy, wouldn't it be rude of us as the host not to play with her?" Vanessa pursed her lips. "Dear Master, are you sure that Elune has cleansed you of all evil powers?" "Damn it, Master is working, don't talk as a maid." Edwin couldn't stand watching his daughter anymore. After lecturing her, he immediately turned to Xueqi. Master, you spoil Vanessa too much. She's almost forgotten her duty as a maid. Duque shrugged. Yes, Master. Are you planning to destroy the entire noble class? Windsor suddenly asked. After all, every knight apprentice is taught how to serve their lord when they are young. Only by making great contributions will they be allowed to enter the noble class and rise above the rest. If Master does this, with our power, we should be able to succeed. But there will be chaos. And who will rule the country in the future? Or do you want to change Stormwind to a Dalajan parliamentary system? Or a monarchical parliamentary system like in Quell, the Loss? Sigh. Duque sighed. So that's the case? This was the inevitable limitation of the people of this era. Due to the lack of productivity and poor transportation, the human kingdoms of Azeroth where Duque had transmigrated were similar to the feudal system of medieval Europe. It was simple. It would take more than a month to send an order to the furthest border. The scope of the king's authority was usually limited to his field of vision. He couldn't control anything beyond a 3-day journey, so he had to give his vassals great autonomy. Every lord was in fact a local emperor. But Duque used 20 years to promote the mechanical revolution with the steam engine as the core, and almost covered the entire territory of Stormwind. It would take less than a week to travel from Stormwind to the furthest territory. Access to roads, access to money, access to government orders. Maintaining the more primitive feudal system under such circumstances was actually hindering the development of the entire society. For example, this time, the princess of the Black Dragon Onyxia had just provoked a little, and the brainless nobles who were blinded by profits couldn't wait to jump out. On the surface, they wanted to increase taxes, but in reality, they wanted more power. Otherwise, they would threaten to abolish the railway transportation. This situation was even worse than when Onyxia provoked the Mason Brotherhood to demand back pay from the Stormwind nobles for the construction of Stormwind City. That time, the Stormwind nobles didn't pay for the construction of the city. It was a typical peasant worker demanding back pay. Of course, there was also the reason why Onyxia lied to the backbone of the Mason Brotherhood. She asked them to falsify accounts and raise the construction costs to demand money from the Stormwind nobles. The problem was that at that time, the nobles were also very poor. Naturally, the nobles thought that this was extortion. Under the Princess of the Black Dragon's provocation, the Mason Brotherhood rioted. The mole she arranged even threw stones at Varian's queen, Tiffany, to death. Varian, who knew that he was in the wrong, was still extremely lenient and exiled the Mason Brotherhood instead of starting a massacre. As a result, the Defias Brotherhood came into being. In this life, because of Duque's influence, the resources in Stormwind were extremely abundant, and the people were extremely happy. It was very difficult to incite conflict between the people and the nobles, so the nobles fought with Bolvar for power. Who would have thought that Duque would return at such a crucial time? Duque didn't want to cause too much chaos, but since Onyxia had started it, he could only carry on with the reform. Chapter 1094. Duque pondered for a moment before replying, I have no intention of disbanding the entire noble class. To be honest, a ruler is a necessary existence. Without a ruler, the people will be in chaos. But what I, and even the entire world, need is a group of rulers who are united and actively preparing for war to face the Burning Legion and other dark forces, not maggots who dare to attack the soldiers on the front line for their own interests. My lord, what else did you see in the River of Time? Windsor asked. War. Not only against the Burning Legion and the Scourge Legion, but also against the ancient elemental lords and the most evil ancient gods. Every 2 to 3 years, there will be a great battle similar to the Third Dark Portal. Duke tricked his subordinates like a charlatan. If Duque had said this 20 years ago, he would have been treated as an idiot. But humans were a race with amazing adaptability. In these 20 years, everyone had gotten used to it. No one did not believe him. Although they believed it, the expressions of the 4 people in the carriage turned serious. Understood. Let us do what we can for our Lord. Let us pave a bright path for this world full of calamities. With Windsor in the lead, the 4 of them bowed to Duque. On the other side, the Storm nobles began to contact each other as soon as the meeting ended. However, they sadly found that they could not find anyone on their side, or even a team that could contend against Duke Marcus' tyranny. At this time, they were pleasantly surprised to find that someone had committed a crime. Countess Katrana and Risto had suddenly announced that there would be a masquerade party tonight. Yes. The kind that wore a mask and did not even need to show their faces. The Countess was so considerate that she specifically instructed the person who delivered the invitation to verbally convey that they did not even recognize the family emblem on the carriage. They only recognized the invitation and not the person. From the most powerful dukes to the insignificant barons, at least 200 to 300 nobles directly agreed to attend the banquet. Bolvar was silent for a long time when he received the news. In the shadows in front of him stood a shadowy man. He was short and capable with deep brown eyes. "Your Excellency, what should we do?" In the end, Bolvar waved his hand. "I have already reached an agreement with Regent Marcus. I will not interfere in this matter. Moreover, doing so would obviously help the Stormwind Kingdom become a more powerful nation. You just need to focus on the Ghost Wolf mission." "Understood." The man silently retreated. Looking at the empty room, Bolvar sighed. "Duque, don't disappoint me." That night, the atmosphere was strange. As the sky gradually darkened, almost all the noble houses opened their doors, and many carriages streamed out. Some of these carriages had family emblems, while others were unemblemished carriages used by servants to purchase goods. More than 4 figures of carriages poured onto the streets at once. Even when Stormwind City was being rebuilt, Duque had designed all the main roads in the city plan to allow 6 carriages to travel side by side. The main road that ran through the entire city was even more exaggerated, with 12 lanes. However, when thousands of carriages came out at the same time in a premeditated manner, the traffic inevitably fell into chaos. If MI7 attempted to follow some of the major nobles, they were bound to go crazy, because they simply did not have enough manpower to follow every carriage and figure out who was sitting inside. However, the nobles quickly fell into doubt. Logically speaking, they would at least attract a large number of stalkers by openly confusing the line of sight. For example, there were only a few dozen elite thieves in MI7, and the rest were ordinary peripheral members. There were only about 500 of them. Moreover, with less than 1,000 thieves scattered throughout Stormwind's vast territory, apart from the Marcus family's territory, which might have fewer people, there should be at least 30 to 40 people in each district, right? The number of thieves that could really be mobilized in Stormwind City would not exceed 200. But there was not a single stalker. The nobles who wanted to participate in the masquerade party arrived without a hitch. They were not worried about being questioned by the 2 regents. The powerful guys had either prepared a substitute, or a few of them claimed to be playing cards together, with a group of loyal servants helping them to falsely testify. Entering Countess Enristo's magnificent manor in the east of Stormwind City that was comparable to a duke's mansion, the nobles could hear the cheerful music coming from the huge and glorious villa from afar. A band composed entirely of high elves played the most popular music from the time of Quel Salis. Sometimes cheerful, sometimes passionate, and sometimes decadent, it constantly tugged at the heartstrings of the nobles. If it wasn't for the fact that what happened today was too big, perhaps at this moment, many young noble men and women would have run to the bushes around the villa to roll around. Although it was called a masquerade party, in fact, it could only deceive outsiders. Nobles who were familiar with each other would always recognize the decorative secret codes that the other party deliberately left on their bodies. Seeing the familiar big shots arriving one by one, the young nobles were ecstatic. In their eyes, this was already enough to overthrow the whole kingdom, and even that damn Grand Duke Marcus was exiled. Unfortunately, after the banquet began, the atmosphere was very strange. Because everyone saw that the heroine of the masquerade party, Countess Enristo, who only wore a small golden mask that covered her eyes, actually ignored the other nobles and danced with a young noble under the accompaniment of music. Even the nobles close by could not hear what the two were whispering. Fortunately, they did not hear it. If they heard it, they would probably be scared out of their wits. "Dear Grand Duke Marcus, I don't remember sending you an invitation." "Yes, that's right." At this moment, the person dancing with the Countess was Duque, who was wearing a ridiculous high elf mask. Of course, no one in this world would know that the 2 metal accessories on the mask's ears were a small version of the dragon salyer. There was also a line of Chinese written on it. "Dragon salyer, click to send." The evil Duque gently held the slender hand of the humanoid black dragon princess with one hand, enjoying the soft touch. At the same time, his other hand unscrupulously hugged her waist. Yes, from time to time, his hand would slip a little. Every time he felt the faint anger from the princess, he would put on an expression of, "My hand slipped, I'm sorry." I like crowds the most, and I have the habit of never letting go of my favorite things. Chapter 1095. Hee. You're really confident. Onyxia had a formal smile on her face. Of course. As an expert and a leader, confidence was a must. That's because you might not win with confidence, but you'll definitely lose without confidence, Xueqi teased without showing any weakness. Hearing this, the Black Dragon Princess laughed coldly in her heart. Hee. If you knew who I was, would you still be so confident? She didn't know that Xueqi was also laughing coldly in his heart. Hee. If you knew that I already knew who you were, would you still be so calm? Would you pretend that you didn't know and continue playing politics with me among the nobles? Or would you flip the table on the spot and turn into a black dragon and start fighting? Just like that, the human and the dragon looked at each other gently and even affectionately in the eyes of others. No one knew that these two fellows couldn't wait to kill each other. Onyxia laughed. Is this the confidence of the legendary Casanova Duke who conquered many queens? The Black Dragon Princess suddenly thought maliciously. If one day, Xueqi found out that the beauty he was very interested in was actually a black dragon, and then she would attack him violently and bite off both of his legs, how cruel and hilarious the scene would be. Maybe, maybe not. Duke's face was full of smiles as he continued to display the demeanor of a Casanova. While he was replying, he was thinking about how to numb Onyxia so that her plan wouldn't be carried out so quickly. He had to give Onyxia hope and not let her fall out so quickly. Otherwise, William would be in danger, or it might directly lead to the failure of the training, and he wouldn't be able to form the legendary Iron Triangle with Valilla and Eyebrawl. However, Xueqi couldn't let Onyxia stay in Stormwind City for too long. In his spatial storage, there was a remnant of a platinum disc that only had 1/5 of its original size left. It was trembling faintly. With the help of the platinum disc's power, Xueqi had already seen that the entire villa was filled with dragonians and half-dragons. It had to be said that the Black Dragon clan's ultimate transformation technique was very powerful. Xueqi wondered maliciously if those idiotic nobles knew that the waiters who were pouring wine for them, as well as the beautiful maidservants with big breasts and fair skin whom the young nobles could not even blink, were all draconids with the appearance of black-skinned lizards. What concerned Xueqi the most was the system elf's label on Onyxia. It wasn't strange to have a leader's mark with a white skull on a black background. What was strange was that Onyxia's mark was orange. An orange name meant that the other party's strength was much higher than his, so it was not advisable to fight him. Ha! System elf, are you kidding me? Don't I already have the platinum disc? Why is it still orange? Xueqi secretly asked the system in the spiritual world. The possibility of an incorrect judgment is 0.2%. According to speculation, Onyxia, who has transformed into a human, has received an unknown enhancement. Unknown strengthening. Huh? Xueqi muttered to himself. Of course, in the eyes of the Black Dragon Princess, it meant something else. Pitiful humans can't get rid of the shackles of tradition after all? I thought you were really so ruthless that you wanted to subvert the traditions of the entire human society. Onyxia smiled. Grand Duke Marcus, in fact, I am very grateful for your concern. But you are not my type. I prefer a more traditional man. Xueqi was embarrassed. Am I being labeled as a good guy? Hey. I haven't done anything yet. Know that, my affection for you is just a pretense, you don't have to label me, okay? At this moment Xueqi, who considered himself not handsome, but elegant and invincible in the field of love, felt 100,000 tons of damage in his heart. But the act had to continue. Tradition is essentially a good thing, but tradition must also adapt to the changes of the times. Don't you think that a great man like me, who has adapted to the development of the new era, is a better choice for you? Xueqi smiled, hinting with a double meaning. On the surface, he was picking up girls, but in fact, he was hinting that holding on to the traditions of feudal territories would not end well. Onyxia was a rare dragon with a high level of political wisdom. She immediately determined that Xueqi was actually trying to recruit her. The Black Dragon Princess sneered inwardly. Hee. It turns out that the great hero Xueqi, who even dared to kill my dead father, is actually afraid of a civil war in Stormwind? Human shackles to their homeland and oaths to the dead are boring enough. But it is precisely like this that he is more like a human. Hee. Duke Marcus, just wait for me to thoroughly destroy your cherished Stormwind. Onyxia was not feigning civility, but a decisive refusal. Her voice suddenly became slightly louder, loud enough for a few nobles nearby to hear. I believe that it is precisely because of the inheritance of civilization and norms that humans can be distinguished from the barbaric beast men, filthy trolls, and other races, and become recognized as a highly intelligent race. Humans who have abandoned their inheritance are no different from beasts, so give up. Rather than lowering my noble head and kneeling in the mud under your despotism, I will choose to use my own method to say no to injustice and tyranny. Onyxia's words were so righteous and awe-inspiring. If Duze didn't know that the person in front of him was a female black dragon, even he himself would have almost believed it. He even shed a few tears of gratitude. A dragon's life is like a play, and it all depends on acting skills. All right, your black dragon family is a best actor and best actress. I will carve the word admire on a sweet potato when I return. Xueqi showed a pitiful expression. It's such a pity that Countess Anristo has such a deep prejudice against me. I hope that time can bridge the gap between us. Some scars cannot be healed by time, Best Actress Onyxia replied coldly. Just in time, the song ended. Xueqi could only reluctantly let go of Onyxia. Of course, as a big antagonist to the nobles, how could he not leave some harsh words before he left? Is that so? Actually, when it comes to persuasion, I personally prefer conquest. Let's call it a day. I think we will have a deeper conversation in the council hall. Yes, we will. Unknowingly, a large group of nobles had stood behind the countess. Now everyone knew that it was Xueqi who came to demonstrate his power. But some things were like this. After shedding all pretenses of cordiality, they would become fearless. It was precisely because of Xueqi's appearance that more wavering nobles began to join Countess Anristo's camp. It was all because of Xueqi. Leaving the villa in a carefree manner, Xueqi really wanted to laugh. If the flag bearer they followed was really a human, perhaps there would be a Stormwind version of Joan of Arc. Unfortunately, they followed a female black dragon. Chapter 1096. Just like that, under the murderous gazes of countless nobles and a large number of Dragonians who were ostensibly servants, Xueqi strode away unhurriedly. He even threw off the mask on his face and revealed his true face. He turned around and smiled mysteriously at the nobles who had followed him to the gate. This, of course, was met with a wave of exclamations and sighs. Even if this was a declaration of war, even if Xueqi had completely stood on the opposite side of the traditional nobles, the boldness of going deep into the enemy's territory alone still made the nobles gasp in admiration. In the eyes of the nobles, Countess Katrana Anristo also stood with her head held high and chest out. She stood at the gate and raised her slender and beautiful hand, and the last piece of golden mask that covered her face suddenly flew into the sky. Two pairs of black eyes that were as deep and mysterious as the universe shot out divine lights and collided passionately in the air. Although Du Peng wanted to describe it as a kitchen knife cutting through a wire, but in the eyes of the nobles, this was a spectacular scene of tigers and wolves staring at each other. They were excited. The traditional nobles finally had a standard-bearer at this moment. A standard-bearer who was not afraid of the evil Duke Marcus's monstrous power and strength. Beautiful Lady Katrana. You are not fighting alone. You are not alone. More and more nobles stood behind Katrana, who was like a saintess descending to the world. Some nobles even pinned their family insignia. Even though they had not taken off their masks, they were standing on the side. The ridiculous herd mentality was fully displayed at this moment. Almost every noble was thinking, that's right. I am a great noble conferred by the late king. As long as I do not commit treason, no one can confiscate my territory. I am the master of my territory. If you, Xueqi, forcibly take away our power, then be prepared for a civil war. Looking at the large army of nobles, Xueqi almost laughed until his stomach cramped. After snorting, Xueqi turned around and no longer looked in the direction of the villa. At the gate, a gorgeous carriage with a blue and white background and the Marcus family's tornado family emblem rushed over at high speed. With an almost elegant movement, the carriage stopped in front of Xueqi. The driver was one of the famous 5 silver sages, Gavin Rad Misfortune. This holy knight, who had once been exiled to the outside world and was now a Grand Marshal of both Stormwind and the Alliance, had just been confirmed to be alive. He, Daneth Trollbane, and Kale, that had successfully built a bridgehead fortress not far from the Hellfire Peninsula where the Dark Portal was located, Fort Glory. However, The space near the Door of Darkness was too unstable. It was only with Kale, that's full strength, that he managed to return a week ago. As soon as he returned, he used this method to express his support for Xueqi. Heh! It's really unfair for a marshal like you to be my driver. Xueqi smiled. It would be my honor to be the driver for the Alliance's commander. Gavin Rad smiled as well. Xueqi entered the carriage with large strides. Naturally, there were his two maids who were very good at fighting, as well as Edwin. Defan, who was supposed to be the leader of the Defia's Brotherhood, could not help but ask, "Is it really good to leave them alone?" "No problem. Let the bullets fly for a while." What Xueqi said was a famous saying from that world. In the ears of the other three, there was naturally an unusual taste. Dwarves were good with guns, so they naturally had bullets. In the eyes of mortals, as long as the gun was fine and the target was aimed, it would hit. In the eyes of experts, even the fastest bullet was nothing more than a flying tool. Shields deflecting bullets, godly evasion, muscles clamping bullets, these were really nothing. This was the difference between realms. A difference that was enough to make others feel deep respect. Unknowingly, Solarian had been Xueqi's maid for 5 years. Even though Xueqi was thrown into the War of the Ancients most of the time and kept busy, this did not stop Solarian from finding opportunities to understand her master. Solarian had originally thought that since Xueqi had chosen to save Kale, that's, the prince she had followed before, she had to fulfill her promise. Everything was out of a promise and obligation. As she learned more about Xueqi's past, she began to understand why so many people around Xueqi followed Xueqi without any complaints or regrets. Even though Xueqi was not around, they still firmly carried out the policies that Xueqi had left behind. They firmly believed and looked forward to Xueqi's return. Perhaps, only such a man can truly save this world that is plagued with disasters. Solarian muttered silently in her heart. Xueqi did not care about Solarian's sensitive thoughts. In his opinion, a human maid who had regained the appearance of an 18-year-old and a beautiful elven maid with a shelf life of tens of thousands of years was enough as eye candy. Xueqi had deliberately allowed the incident to ferment, and he had this excuse. This was because on January 2nd, year 21 of the Dark Portal, which was the day after New Year's Day, the Alliance would hold a meeting. This meeting was of great significance. It was not only the 20th anniversary of the Alliance, but also to welcome the Night Elves to join the Alliance. And according to the agreement made by the various countries at the end of the Third War of the Dark Portal 5 years ago, the Alliance would no longer have a leader. Instead, a standing leader would be elected every 5 years, and a new Alliance commander and deputy commander would be elected. Last time, because of urgent matters, after Xueqi returned from the void where Karazhan was, he took the position of Alliance commander for a time. Later, because of the Archimonde curse, he resigned. Now that Xueqi had returned and announced that he was fine, everyone knew that this was just a formality. The position of Alliance commander would definitely belong to Xueqi. This was just like when the leaders of the Celestial Empire went on a visit before Xueqi, and then conveniently signed a number of trade contracts. In fact, they had already been signed and negotiated, and only announced at once. Since the birth of the Alliance, there had been a total of 3.5 commanders. The first was Anduin Lothar. He was the least controversial. If it were not for Xueqi's dazzling achievements, he would probably have been given the title of God of War. The second was Alexandros Mograine. Although he was rigorous in his use of troops, it had been proven many times that his ability was limited to one army. With 200,000 troops, he could give you the effect of 400,000 troops. Give him 400,000 troops, and it was still 400,000. The third was Xueqi. His dazzling achievements were enough for him to be recognized as the God of War. The only thing that restricted him previously was that he could not get the support of the Rotterdam Kingdom. The remaining half was William, who could be considered an apprentice under Lothar. All the kings knew who the best candidate was. What was more rare was that Xueqi had started his career early, had the best achievements and had the best achievements. All the kings respected him. If there were no accidents, Xueqi could be the commander for at least another 30 years. As long as Xueqi did not announce that the Alliance would become an empire, everyone would respect him. Under such an atmosphere, the leaders of the various countries who arrived at Rotterdam on the 1st of January seemed extremely harmonious. Chapter 1097. During the first years of the Dark Portal, Rapid travel through teleportation portals was something unimaginable to most people. With the development of magical technology, directional teleportation portals had been greatly improved in the past 20 years. During the First Alliance Conference, the kings of the various countries had taken ships and carriages to rush to the conference. Now, teleportation portals were all in place. Those who could become the rulers of a country all had to deal with a myriad of issues. As long as it was safe, no one would have the time to waste on the road. In Teldrassil, Tyron's trusted aide Melland was still feeling uneasy. I wonder if the kings of the various countries will give us the cold shoulder now that we've joined the alliance? In fact, the Nature faction had the same worries. Fandral Staghelm even publicly expressed that Tyron's actions were akin to being cold-shouldered. However, the Night Elves were more inclined towards the alliance. After all, on one side was a pleasant-looking fellow, while on the other side was either Bonehead or the green-skinned beastman who had killed their demigod Cenarius. However, no matter how they thought about it, it was better to actually pay them a visit. I won't. Tyron smiled gently. Yes, Your Excellency High Priest. Has anything happened recently? I feel like you're in a good mood, and you're glowing. Is that so? You must be imagining things. Tyron turned her head away, blushing. Time's up. Stepping through the teleportation portal that was opened by the Dalaran wizard who was sent ahead of time, the Night Elves only felt a sense of dizziness. They had not experienced the feeling of space deviation ever since they exiled their compatriots, the Blood Elves who now called themselves Dorii. It was a very short feeling, lasting only a few seconds. By the time they came back to their senses, they were already in a wide passageway that wasn't too long. The portal was less than 10 meters away. Sentinels! Puff out your chests. Melon's idea was to display the might of the Night Elves. Unexpectedly, as soon as they stepped out, a female figure in a blue and white wizard robe quickly walked up to them. Sister Tyrande. We meet again. Her tone was calm, but her actions were passionate. Under the gaze of Melon and the Sentinels, the crowned Queen Jaina rushed up and hugged Tyrande. Her actions were extremely intimate, as if they were sisters who had been separated for many years. You're the queen. Pay attention to your image. Although she said it was a reminder, Tyrande's tone was as if she was doting on her own sister. Melland was shocked. She hadn't seen the two of them being so intimate the last time they worked together to kill Arkheron on Mount Hyjal. What the hell happened? Sister, sit in my carriage. Jaina pointed at her royal carriage. Then I'll have to trouble you, sister. Tyrande smiled gently and waved at Melanie, motioning for them to follow her. She then boarded the carriage without hesitation. After all, the mana consumption of the teleportation portal depended on the size and weight of the object being transported. Tyrande did not bring her famous white tiger with her, so she could only rely on the Alliance to provide transportation. With Kurdalas, the queen of the earliest member of the Alliance, leading the way, it was the best way for the Night Elves to integrate into the Alliance. Along the way, Tyrande and Jaina chatted happily in the carriage. Melland and the other sentinels were filled with curiosity. As soon as they arrived at the newly built Lordaeron Palace, they bumped into the Queen of Dorii, Sylvanas, and the Queen of Alterac, Elucia. Without any formal greetings, Elucia came up and gave Tyrande a warm hug. Sister, welcome to the Lordaeron continent. After the meeting, you can come to my South Sea city if you have time. Sylvanas came up and gave her a hug as well. Sister, we meet again. Sylvanas' tone was slightly calmer, but everyone could see that she was friendly towards Tyrande. Elves of two different skin colors, two leaders hugging each other. To the Night Elves who had been isolated for thousands of years, this was a historic moment. Some of the older Night Elf sentries felt their noses tingle. The two elves were ultimately of the same origin. It was purely a difference in ideology that caused them to split. Who would have thought that after the ancient war 10,000 years ago, the Night Elves and Blood Elves would fight side by side again? Compared to Jaina and Elucia's enthusiasm, Sylvanas was more reserved. She and Tyrande had another topic in common: shooting. Tyrande was a priestess and archer. She was also very skilled in archery. The two strongest archers of this era chatted as they walked side by side. The two queens in front were even more affectionate. Elucia and Jaina were holding hands as they walked as if they were shopping. Behind them, Melanie and the sentries were dumbfounded. As if they had arranged to meet, Duque had arrived with the Windrunner sisters. Duque gestured elegantly. Tyrande, Welcome to Lordaeron. Actually, you've already met the 3 Windrunner sisters. But please allow me to formally introduce you. Aurelia and Sasha are the leaders of the newly formed organization, Silver Dawn. Doesn't it sound fake? There's no other way. This is an official meeting. Even though they've already met each other sincerely and reached a consensus, they had no choice but to introduce each other in public. Aurelia held Tyrand's hands and said elegantly, "Welcome, Sister Tyrand. Silver Dawn is a civil organization with the High Elves as its core. Its goal is to fight against the Scourge. However, we are directly under the command of the Alliance. If you have any missions against the Scourge, please call us sisters. We'll definitely have many opportunities to interact." Tyrand looked at Xueqi. Just as she was about to say something, a rough and strong voice suddenly sounded. "Xueqi, don't mix with the women. Come and drink with me. This time, we'll drink you until you're unconscious and get the good stuff out of your stomach." The 2 short winter melons seemed to have rolled over, directly carrying the dumbfounded Duke up and ran. Tyrand gaped. "That's the Dwarven King of Iron Forge, Magni Bronzebeard, and his 3rd brother Bu Lang," Aurelia replied. "Don't mind those stinky men. We're having a party tonight. Remember to come." Sasha, who was the most active, whispered into Tyrand's ears. While official negotiations were important when it came to interactions between nations, personal relationships were also important. If one attended the meeting but did not even have a private conversation, then the visit would undoubtedly be a failure. The first and second day were all given to the kings to chat in private. It was obvious that Tyrand was not excluded from the Alliance's circle. Chapter 1098. On the first of the day, Tyrand was busy greeting the leaders of the various countries. Thanks to the battle at Mount Hyjal and her relationship with Durin, they were all on good terms. Of course, the final victor would still be the private gathering at night. At 10 at night, Tyrand arrived at the guest house of Sind Dorii under the protection of sentries. Along the way, not only were there sentries every few steps, but there were also teams of elite guards patrolling the area. There was also a large 3-dimensional protective magic formation set up by the arcanists of Sind Dorii. The security was so tight that it left one speechless. Looking at the solemn and nervous expressions of the guards, Melon subconsciously thought that they were about to hold an important meeting that concerned the survival of the world. Seeing how relaxed High Priestess Tyrand looked, holding a thin bag in her left hand and humming a song as she went to the meeting, Melon finally couldn't hold it in anymore. "Sister, is it really okay to be so casual?" As a member of the Elune Sisterhood, this was how they addressed the older and higher priestesses. Tyrand smiled. "Sister, it's fine. I'm really just going to make friends. The tight security is just a trick to fool outsiders." "Really?" Tyrand's casual tone didn't match the solemn atmosphere at all. Under the guidance of the leader of the Blood Elf Paladins, Liadline, Tyrand and the others finally arrived at the basement of the guest house. In such a secluded place? Could it be a trap? Melon couldn't help but gulp. Just what kind of battle of words was waiting for him in front of him? At the entrance, the stern-faced female guards opened the door. The heavy door creaked open. Suddenly, an unimaginable wave of voices came rushing at them. "Catch her! Don't let her get away!" The voice giggled. "Boo-hoo! You sisters are bullying me." The female voice sounded aggrieved. "Jaina, don't use magic," someone complained. "Then Sasha, put away your rubber arrows first," someone protested. Melon recognized every voice. But Melon didn't dare to confirm it. In the next second, a slender figure in disheveled clothes rushed through the tall, opaque entrance and rushed to the door. Melander's jaw dropped. This was the famous master of Theramore, Queen Jaina Proudmoore of Cult Tiras. The problem was that Jaina was wearing a silver bra, a translucent light blue nightgown and a pair of silver briefs. "Sister Tyrand, come quickly." The Windrunner sisters were bullying him. "Let's do 3 against 3. Jaina grabbed Tyrand's hand anxiously. In the blink of an eye, a white pillow flew across the air and hit Jaina's head. Jaina immediately let out a whimper that sounded like a small animal. "Woohoo!" Then the stitches on the pillow seemed to loosen, and the snow-white velvet inside flew out in all directions. "Sure. I will join the battle." Tyrant smiled as she took off her clothes, revealing a body that Melanie could not help but think was perfect no matter how many times she looked at it. She then put on a white nightgown. Tyrant, who had always looked holy and noble, turned to look at her confidant with a reproachful expression. "What are you looking at? Have you never seen a slumber party or a pillow fight before?" Melander was stunned. "Sister, this is a custom passed down from the humans." Tyrant chuckled as she threw a pillow back at Melander. This time, it was Sasha who hugged her head and whimpered. It was hard to describe Melander's current embarrassment. But this was probably a good thing. "Sister, have fun," Melander said almost subconsciously. "Yes, I will. Come and get me when the sun rises." With that, Tyrant threw another pillow that could twist and turn at Servanas, who was dodging at high speed. The heavy door slowly closed. Melander stood there in a daze as if he had just seen a new world. After a long while, he asked Rhiadaline, "Do all the queens of the Alliance like to play like this?" Rhiadaline put her hands on her hips and sighed. "Of course not. This is a small circle that you don't know about. Poor Queen Kalia couldn't get in even after waiting for 20 years. Melander was confused. Regardless, Melander still felt happy for Tyrant. As someone close to her, she knew how Tyrant had lived for the past 10,000 years. Politically, she had to exile her fellow High Elves and face Fandrel's provocations. Privately, she had rejected the Storm Rage brothers because of that incident. Although Tyrant's face was always filled with warmth and kindness, she had never been happy on the inside. It had been a long time since she had seen her happy. What happened to Tyrant? Why did she suddenly change after a trip to the gushing spring lake? What she didn't know was that Xueqi, the key person in this matter, was about to vomit. F***CK. I should never have taught the method of distilling liquor to those damn dwarves. The drunken Xueqi looked at the corpses of the 4 dwarves in the hall of the Steel Stove Castle State Guesthouse. Magni, Kudrin, Jerben, and Bulang. Xueqi was furious. His boss was drunk, so someone had to clean up the mess. The guards of the Steel Stove Castle came in and dragged their boss away as if they were used to it. On Xueqi's side, a maid came to his rescue. "Master, according to you, you're asking for it." Vanessa spat out her poisonous tongue. "Ugh, send me back to the Storm State Guesthouse. Aurelia and the others are having a pajama party." Vanessa purposely provoked Xueqi. Xueqi imagined it. It was a scene that could reach the level of killing a virgin. But not now. That bastard Magni saw that he couldn't win with just one type of wine, so he mixed it with another. In the end, even if Xueqi won, it was a Pyrrhic victory. Those vodka-like things had been specially added with some kind of bubble drink. Once he drank it, the smell of alcohol would rush to his head. Even though Xueqi had used all his magic circuits and had the system elf help his body detoxify, his combat ability was still reduced by more than half. Asking Xueqi to go there now was like sending himself to his death. Xueqi shook his head like a rattle drum. Be good and send me back to the guest house." Okay. Vanessa agreed. But in a place where Xueqi didn't notice, Vanessa smiled as if she had succeeded. Groggy, Xueqi first went to the toilet to vomit. Then, he let Vanessa help him wipe his body and fell on the bed like a dead dog. "System elf, other than those on the safety list, if anyone else comes near, you have to wake me up even if you use electric shock." "Understood. Don't worry, host." Chapter 1099. Ugh. The feeling of a hangover was terrible. His head was splitting, and he clearly wanted to sleep, but he couldn't. He breathed heavily into the room, and the stench of alcohol made him want to vomit. Unfortunately, he had already vomited everything he could, and the rest had entered his blood vessels. He could only hope for his liver to break down more alcohol enzymes so that he could sober up faster. In a daze, Xueqi noticed that someone was touching him. The system genie showed a green light. That meant he was on the same side. Xueqi didn't care. Anyway, he was a weakling now, and he was counting on others to serve him. That person took advantage of the darkness to come up, and her soft little hands groped him. Then, Xueqi realized that she seemed to be using armor break on him. "Don't worry about me. Let me sleep." Huff. The other party seemed to be startled, but then came a mosquito-like reply. "Okay." "Huh. Wait, Something seemed wrong.
Although his body senses were rather slow, Xueqi could still feel the strange touch when the other party was gently and carefully sharpening Xueqi's godly sword. Xueqi forced his heavy eyelids open and saw a blonde head. Without long ears. Was it a human? The only blonde human female around him was Jaina. But Jaina definitely didn't have this kind of hair that reached her waist. Xueqi suddenly woke up. He finally saw who it was and cried out involuntarily, "Kalia?" Like a stupid thief who had been caught stealing for the first time, Kalia froze, completely at a loss for what to do. However, in the next moment, 2 lines of tears rushed out of Kalia's eyes and slid down her still elegant cheeks. "If it's me, can't I do anything? Xueqi, do you hate me that much?" The moonlight shone into the room, making Kalia's bright blonde hair shine. Time passed, but the years still left traces on the face and body of this once beautiful princess. Under the moonlight, there were already some crow's feet at the corners of Kalia's eyes. Kneeling at the end of the bed, her unreserved female body was full of the traces of a mature woman. Sitting up, Xueqi suddenly sighed. "It's been 20 years.
That's right. It had been 20 years. From the very beginning, when they first met, there were a few short but interesting conversations. Then, he helped Kalia fake her death. Then, 5 years ago, when Arthas killed his father, he forced Kalia to return to Lordaeron to ascend to the throne. It had been 20 years since then. Actually, ever since Xueqi found out from Vanessa that Kalia refused to use his eternal blessing, Xueqi knew Kalia's decision. Returning to her youth was seen by her as a breakup gift, but Kalia refused to accept it. Therefore, she would rather appear in front of Xueqi in her youthful appearance. Her tears were still flowing, causing Xueqi's heart to ache. Yeah. It's been 20 years, but in these 20 years, I've never regretted even for a second. Kalia's voice was still crisp and soft. It was like an awl that pierced straight into Xueqi's heart. Xueqi's mouth moved for a long time, and he let out a long sigh. "You're so silly. I've always done those things purely because I don't want the heavens to destroy your beauty." Leaning over lightly, Kalia sat on Xueqi's knees, and put her hands on Xueqi's shoulders. "So what? The only one who saved me from that cage called the palace was Xueqi. The only one who gave me the most regretless youth, and let me enjoy 10 years of freedom that I couldn't even dream of, was Xueqi. Maybe in your eyes, I'm just a passerby. But in my eyes, you're all I have. So, even if I don't want to return to Lordaeron, as long as it's your wish, I'll do it." Xueqi was silent. Kalia's forehead gently touched Xueqi's forehead, and her tears flowed even more. "I'm sorry. I know that you like the Windrunner sisters the most, and I know that you don't like me, but I really like you too much, and I love you too much. In the beginning, I was willing to wait silently. But you accidentally went away for 10 years, and immediately after you came back, there was a fierce battle, and then you disappeared for more than 4 years." What else could Xueqi say? He was also very helpless. It was always the void or the river of time. If sorry works, I'm willing to say it 100,000 times. 1,000,000 times. But I really don't want to lie to myself anymore, and wait like a fool. I've waited for 20 years, and I really can't accept that I won't have any emotional interaction with you in the future, and that I'll end my life like this. So, even if what I'm going to do next is wrong, please forgive me, okay? After saying that, Kalia wanted to act recklessly. Who knew that Xueqi would suddenly push her away? Kalia was extremely shocked. "Weren't you drugged?" Needless to ask, it must be someone close to him who was a spy. He shouldn't have let Vanessa stay by Kalia's side in the first place. Damn it, a good maid has become bad. Xueqi's face twitched. "Damn it, Vanessa, you bastard maid. I'll deal with you later." In the maid's room outside the door, even though the soundproofing was good, Vanessa, who was not asleep, suddenly felt a chill. Turning back, Xueqi fiercely looked at Kalia. "Idiot woman. You even gave up your last chance to escape from my clutches. Don't blame the world for your stupidity. You're finished. Just wait to become my collection for eternity." After Xueqi's malicious words, Kalia's tears turned into laughter. "Good. I've waited for this day for 20 years. Take this, watch my throat slash." Xueqi's godly sword stabbed forward, and the cruel sword edge instantly pierced through. Kalia was like a swan that had been shot by a sharp arrow.
Her long and perfect neck was stretched to the limit because of the pain, and the tears that had already been gushing out were like a broken dam.
But this time, they were tears of joy.
At the same time, because of the pain, her throat seemed to be sealed, and she could not say a single word. That's right, Xueqi was indeed very rough, but for a woman who was crazy for love and was willing to throw herself at him like a moth to a flame, for a woman who had waited for 20 years and was not willing to wait for even a second more. Even a second more was torture.
This was just right. Xueqi. Xueqi. Xueqi.
Xueqi. Ku. Kalia seemed to want to pour out the feelings that had accumulated in her heart for 20 years. She did not do anything, but cried out Xueqi's name the whole time. Unknowingly it was dawn.
Xueqi, that eternal blessing. I'd better use it. Otherwise, I won't have confidence in front of those beautiful sisters who won't age. Yes. Chapter 1100. On the 2nd of January, Queen Kalia suddenly summoned the ministers of the Rotterdam kingdom urgently. A large number of nobles looked at the radiant queen on the throne in astonishment, completely speechless. In order to avoid suspicion, Xueqi asked Kalia to ingest the blessing of eternal life in stages. The changes would not be too obvious in a short period of time. However, just because her appearance did not change did not mean that her spirit did not change. The old ministers Mograine and Abendis knew that the queen had not been happy in the past few years. However, they had no choice. Kalia was the only legitimate heir of the royal family. If they did not support her to ascend the throne, all the people of the Rotterdam kingdom would be like wandering ghosts. They would lose their loyalty and cohesion. That was a deep-rooted concept that had been rooted in this land for 2,800 years and had been passed down for countless generations. Since the day the queen ascended the throne, the old ministers had been worried about the continuation of the royal bloodline. Even though there were countless young nobles in the country who had launched an emotional attack on Queen Kalia, they were all chased away and killed. Everyone knew that Queen Kalia only had one him in her heart. The problem was that although that guy was good, no one knew where he had died all year round. Besides, he had a few queens who had an unclear relationship with him. The people of the Rotterdam kingdom could accept an extremely powerful husband, but they would never accept their queen running off to be a lover. All right, Queen Kalia, who had been frowning and forcing a smile since Lin Li's disappearance, suddenly changed 180 degrees today. Considering the news of Lin Li's visit, Mograine and Abendis looked at each other, and saw the same answer in each other's eyes. Sigh. Still unable to escape from Xueqi's clutches? Queen Kalia said, once upon a time, I also thought that noble bloodline was everything. Obviously, this thinking is wrong. The great commander of the alliance, Duke Marcus, once said something that I deeply agree with. People are noble because of their great deeds, not because of their bloodline. The queen's words caused a commotion among the ministers. They were too embarrassed to interrupt the queen because she had not finished speaking. True nobles, such as Anduin Lothar, have the noblest sentiments and the grandest thoughts. When he discovered that Thoradin the Great's bloodline was a restriction to the various human kingdoms, and even to the growing number of races in the alliance, he decisively chose to end the noblest bloodline in his own hands. As for the despicable, even if they have the so-called noble bloodline, just like my brother Arthas who killed my father, King Tyrrhenus, they will also do things that will anger the gods. The mention of Arthas was an eternal pain in the hearts of all the people of Rotterdam. He killed his father and annihilated all the nobles and citizens of the Rotterdam city. He even spread the plague and death throughout most of the Rotterdam kingdom's territory. If it weren't for the fact that the various countries had suffered great losses and were unable to go on an expedition to Northrend, the people of the Rotterdam kingdom would have long gone to take revenge. Now that Kalia said that Arthas was a despicable person with a noble bloodline, it was really hard to refute. Especially when Kalia said this as the only heir of the Menethil royal family. No one dared to object. Queen Kalia stood up. She seemed to have some difficulty moving, but her beautiful appearance combined with her righteousness made her soft voice sound powerful. 2,800 years ago, my ancestor opened up the then barren Tirisful forest for the humans, so he was honored as king from the leader of a clan. 2,800 years later, Arthas was stripped of his right to be king because of his heinous crimes. With history as a mirror, only people with both talent and virtue are qualified to be king. So if there is such a day, someone more suitable than me to lead Rotterdam appears, even if his surname is not Menethil, I, Kalia Menethil, will not be stingy with my throne. I will abdicate.
The words of a king were an oath that was thousands of times more serious than a nail on a board. In a sense, Kalia's words were like opening a Pandora's box with her own hands. For people who were greedy for power, this was undoubtedly asking for trouble. But everyone knew that Kalia had said more than once that she did not want to be queen. This was completely forcing a duck onto a perch. If it was not Duque looking for her, but someone else, she would definitely not be willing to come back. It was originally like this in history. It was only when the Burning Legion's universe fleet played large-scale landing battles around Azeroth that Kalia, who had been missing for almost 30 years, resolutely came out of seclusion and participated in this war against evil.
Mograine and Abendis sighed.
2 days ago, they heard that Duque was in Stormwind City against the nobles and wanted to implement large-scale reforms. They did not expect Kalia to be the first to take the lead to support Duque today. Think about it. Even the queen of the old powerful Rotterdam took the lead to announce that only sages could be kings. What right did the small nobles in the south have to cling to the so-called aristocratic regulations from 2,800 years ago? This was simply a slap in the face to the nobles of Stormwind City. Kalia did not give the nobles of Rotterdam any room to refute, and directly announced the end of the meeting. One could imagine that the wave of sages being kings that would be set off next would sweep through the entire human world. After the meeting, Kalia quickly went to the side hall. Jaina was already waiting at the door.
Sister Kalia. Sister Jaina. The two queens hugged each other intimately.
They had been best friends since they were very young. After all, they were both princesses and were close in age. But later, as Jaina was married to Duque by King Theron and left for the Elven Forest, the two had no choice but to alienate each other. Unexpectedly, after a big circle, they were back together again. Jaina brought Kalia into the side hall. Only then did Kalia realize that the queens and leaders were already there. Seeing Kalia's awkward walk, Jaina snickered and laughed maliciously. Speaking of which, Duque is a big jerk. He had to torment us human girls. The three of us were going to chase him. Elves are all very loving. That's not it.
He wasn't gentle to me at all.
I insisted that I didn't want him, but he still bullied me regardless and forced me to learn those shameful things.
The pure and holy Tyrant seemed to be reminiscing as she held her face in her hands. The other six were shocked. As the high priestess of the moon goddess, Tyrant had turned into a female chauffeur. When she suddenly started racing, a pure girl like Kalia could not afford to be hurt. Elugia could only change the topic in embarrassment. But, is it really okay for you to do this?
I'm immortal.
I'm not a talented person.
If I take the throne, there might be all sorts of bad things that will happen. Why don't you take advantage of the fact that Mograine and the other old ministers are still here to arrange things and find a chance to retire?
Chapter 1101. Not every queen was like Kalia, who said to let go and then let go. It had nothing to do with greed for power. It was purely determined by one's ability and personality. Kalia did not have any special talents. She was not strong in battle, and she was not as good at internal affairs as Elugia. However, she was more suitable to be a spiritual leader than anyone else. Since her ability was at the level of a mascot, she might as well retire early and have a peaceful life. Otherwise, without external protection, she would get into trouble sooner or later while sitting on the throne. She would either become a puppet or lose her life due to a betrayal. At that moment, Duque came in. Seeing the harmonious atmosphere, he rubbed his nose in embarrassment. The throne meeting is about to begin. Everyone, get ready. Just as he was about to run, Queen Sylvanas suddenly put a hand on Duque's shoulder. Feeling guilty, Duque was immediately petrified.
I swear I won't add any more sisters for you.
Duque surrendered first. Sasha burst out laughing.
Second sister, you scared him.
The others in the harem also smiled. Only Kalia buried her face in Jaina's chest, not daring to look at anyone. Queen Sylvanas could not even be angry. She put her hands on her hips.
No.
We discussed it all night at the pajama party and came to a conclusion.
What conclusion? Queen Sylvanas seemed to have lost her temper.
I really don't know if you did it on purpose or not. We sisters are either queens or leaders. Most of us are so busy that we don't have time to accompany you all day. None of us can let go of our careers or our people. And the world is getting more and more dangerous. So we can only let you take advantage of us, you little bastard.
Unknowingly, these beauties had gathered around Xueqi.
Their beautiful eyes wandered, and finally landed on the oldest Tyrant. Tyrant smiled. Xueqi, you are someone who can do great things. Perhaps the safety of the entire world of Azeroth rests on your shoulders. Since we are willing to follow you, we do not want to burden you anymore.
Instead of crushing you to the point where you can't breathe, it's better to let go and let you soar freely.
Aurelia, who was the first to become Xueqi's woman, said, Yes. We have an agreement, as long as you make all the sisters happy first. Do as you wish. Although Dumuk was touched, his facial muscles were still twitching. An infinite harem sounds great, doesn't it? However, the prerequisite was that he had to please all of these ladies. Only then would he be able to increase his happiness by one. Xueqi suddenly felt that one of Gu Tianle's words was very true. A man's energy is limited, but the number of girls in this world was limitless.
Using a limited amount of energy to bombard an unlimited amount of girls, this in itself is a losing battle. If he continued to act recklessly, he would only be finding trouble for himself. Xueqi spoke righteously and with the aura of an honest and reliable young master. He raised 3 fingers and said, I swear. Before they could make their vows, the heavens suddenly sent a bolt of lightning from the clear sky, as if a group of fellow Taoists were going through a tribulation.
Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. After a while, there was a downpour, followed by sleet and snow.
Even Tyrant, who looked so serious, laughed, not to mention the other younger ladies.
Ha ha ha, ha ha ha. Sasha, who had the most carefree personality, laughed so hard that her stomach hurt. She laughed so hard that she almost choked on her breath. She stopped teasing Xueqi. According to their ages, first Tyrant, then the 3 Windrunner sisters, followed by Alucia, Kalia, and Jaina. All of them came up to him and gave him hot kisses. No more, no less. It was as if they were on a stopwatch, each kiss lasting 10 seconds. These people were all immortal or long-lived races that could easily live for more than 10,000 years. For example, Tyrant received Teldrassil's blessing when she was 3,000 years old, and her age was frozen until recently. The first 100 years of an elf's life were considered their childhood, and the last 100 years were considered their old age. The rest of the time in between was considered their youth. Therefore, even the oldest Tyrant and Aurelia were only about 25 years old by human standards. Looking at such a harem, Xueqi was so happy that he almost fainted. Du Zhe's moral integrity was very full, except when he was dissatisfied. There's nothing wrong with that. When Tyrant privately brought up how to solve the beastman's logging problem, Xueqi patted his chest and promised to leave it to him. That night, there was a formal welcome banquet. At the same time, it was announced that the Night Elves had officially joined the Alliance, and a grand ceremony was held. The Candlelight Club spent 4 years in the city, using a full set of mechanical equipment to fill in the ruins of Lordaeron. They then rebuilt Lordaeron by the lake to the west of the ruins, and held a grand bonfire party. Music could be heard everywhere, and the streets were filled with joyful and joyous Alliance people. During the throne meeting on the 3rd of January, the decision to let Xueqi, who had been cleansed of his curse, return to being the Alliance's commander was unanimously approved. At the same time, in order to deal with the possible crisis of the Burning Canyon and Burning Steppes, the Iron Furnace Fort would be the Alliance's leader for the next 5 years. The ceremonial officer announced, Let's welcome the tribe's emissary, the Darkspear Trolls leader, Wajin. Wajin came in, one hand on his chest, and bowed to the Alliance's leader, Magni, and the commander, Xueqi. I bring greetings from the tribe's chief, Sar. At the same time, as comrades who once fought side by side against the evil Burning Legion, the chief hopes that we can solve the dispute over the wood in a peaceful way now that the Night Elves have announced their participation in the Alliance. Sar had sent the wisest Wajin, and not some beastman who only had muscles left in his brain. He had good intentions in the first place. Of course, only Dooku and the other leaders who were wise enough to understand the tribe could see this. If we can get along, we are brothers. If we can't, we are strangers. The dwarves have never been afraid of anyone who dares to use force, Magni said with a heroic look. If anyone thought that the Dwarf King was a fool, they would definitely be tricked to death. Because his next words were, Xueqi. I don't know the situation there, so I'll leave it to you. Tyrant also spoke at the right time. Since the Night Elves have officially joined the Alliance, I believe the Alliance will give us a solution that will satisfy both sides. Xueqi raised his eyebrows.
All right, first of all, does the Night Elves agree to let the tribe enter Grey Valley to cut wood?
Tyrant shook her head. Apologies, trees are not just a simple resource for the Night Elves. Most of the trees in Grey Valley are old. When the oak trees and other ancient trees are old enough, they can develop intelligence and evolve into ancient trees of life, ancient trees of wisdom, or ancient trees of war. They are the symbiotic partners of our people, and also our weapons. We cannot allow the tribe to enter our territory and cut wood. Wujin suddenly felt bitter in his mouth. Chapter 1102. Woken bowed again. I'm sorry, but I would like to clarify something here.
Duque spread his hands. Go ahead.
Ever since the tribe crossed the Kalimdor continent and took root in the barren, ownerless land of Duroder, the tribe has been trying to avoid invading the territories of other intelligent races. When Woken said this, Tyrant could not help but clench her fists and gently bite her lips. How could the death of the demigod Cenarius be forgotten so easily? Of course, Woken noticed Tyrant's reaction, but because of his position, he could only continue. The tribe has not mastered the more advanced construction methods. Out of development needs, the tribe needs at least 100,000 tons of wood. This number almost made Tyrant jump on the spot. Attention! It was processed wood, not raw wood. Converted to raw wood, the number was even more exaggerated. Woken braced himself. According to preliminary estimates, this is only the first phase of our needs. Only the first phase. Tyrant almost wanted to declare war on behalf of the Night Elves. Woken continued to explain, the tribe has no intention of making things difficult for the Night Elves. We have no other choice. The nearby Barrenlands, Stonetelin Mountains, Mulgore, Thousand Needles, and Dust Wallow have no suitable wood. Although Feralas in the southwest has good wood, we can't transport it out of the Thousand Needles, which is extremely bad terrain. If possible, the tribe is willing to exchange any of our existing resources.
Tyrant gritted her teeth. The Night Elves will never trade their friends.
The atmosphere suddenly fell to a freezing point. Woken had a headache over this matter. The tribe needed a huge amount of wood, but they could not use force. Coupled with the Night Elves joining the alliance, the tribe could only be cautious on this matter.
Tyrant could not help but look at Duque, who was sitting in the seat of honor.
Tyrant's mood was very complicated. She had absolute trust in Duque, but she did not only represent herself. However, she did not represent just herself. If Duke did things unfairly, then the voices within the clan against joining the alliance would quickly rise, and by then, there would be a big problem. Duque raised his hand and made a gesture of suppression. Lord Whisperwind, please don't get too worked up. Wujin, could you please tell me the standard of the wood your tribe wants?
Woking immediately replied, converted to logs, it's at least 30 yards high, hard enough to be used as the main beam of a house.
Duque smiled. That's easy. Grey Valley was not the only place in the world that had this kind of wood. Just the Elwyn Forest and Twilight Forest within the territory of Stormwind Kingdom have plenty of such wood. Although there was a lot of good timber around Eagle Nest Mountain, a third of the areas mentioned above were directly under Duque's jurisdiction. He was the master of his territory. If he could make the decision himself, he would be even more daring. Perhaps this was what it meant to be pretentious. Really? This time, Wujin was really happy. Do you have a sample? Of course. Duque snapped his fingers, and Vanessa, who was wearing a maid's uniform, came up. Inform the Mason Brotherhood to bring a sleeper in. Understood. From the beginning of the reconstruction of Lordaeron City, Alucia and Jaina began to help Lordaeron build 2 railways. One was from the North Flow Coast to Lordaeron City, which was convenient for reconstruction. The other was the east-west railway artery that traversed the woodlands of Tirisfal and the eastern and western Plaguelands, all the way to Tyr's Hand, connecting the entire old territory of Lordaeron. In the capital, there was no shortage of materials to build railways. Not long after, 8 big men came in carrying a train sleeper that had long been cut into square strips. Of course, it could not be ordinary goods that could be used as a sleeper.
Moreover, the steam engines in this world were far worse than the steam engines in the industrial era before Duque crossed over.
Because of the industrial level, iron and steel were still far from the standards that Duque wanted. As a result, the steam engines here were larger and heavier, and even the train tracks were twice as large as those on Earth. As a result, the requirements for the sleepers were also much higher. Wujin's eyes lit up when he saw this.
He touched the wood, knocking here and there, then looked up. Can the Alliance guarantee that the wood sold to the Horde is of this quality?
And can the Alliance really transport so much wood across the sea? Don't joke. As early as 4 years ago, the Alliance could already transport 100,000 troops and equipment across the sea to the Kalimdor continent. It's really not difficult to transport 100,000 tons of wood.
Xueqi smiled. As for the quality, I can also guarantee it here. Of course, there will be losses when transporting such a large amount of wood across the sea, and the price will inevitably need to be adjusted.
What does the Alliance want from the Horde?
Wujin asked.
Ores. High-purity ores, mainly iron ore. Other rare ores are also needed, such as gold, mithril, true silver, thorium.
When Xueqi said this, the eyes of the few dwarves next to him sparkled.
Magni did not look like a king at all, and his mouth was actually drooling like a dog. Xueqi rolled his eyes at Magni. When Bu Lang saw this, he hurriedly pulled his big brother who had a blacksmith soul to wake Magni up. Damn, don't affect the Alliance's image here, okay? If it weren't for the fact that you are the king of the Alliance and the Horde, I would definitely beat you up. Wujin thought for a moment.
After all, the Horde was in urgent need of wood, so he nodded and agreed.
Then the specific proportion and method of the transaction. Now that the Alliance has recognized the Barren Lands as the Horde's territory, and Dust Wallow Swamp is also under Theramor's control, then the transaction will be found near the border. As for the price and details of the transaction, we will let the people below discuss it. When two major forces negotiated, it was always the boss who set the tone, and the people below would grind out the details and the price. For the sake of insurance, Wujin proposed to go to the Elven Forest to see the goods. Xueqi agreed and welcomed Wujin to the Elven Forest as a guest.
After sending Wujin away, Xueqi said, "Your Majesty Proudmoore, the transaction with the Horde will be handed over to you."
Jaina nodded. Is there anything I need to pay attention to? First of all, we must be fair, whether it is price, quantity, or quality. We agreed to give 10,000 tons of high-quality wood, not one less. For the Horde, the difference in the content of ores must not exceed 5%. Sal is a fair guy. As long as we are strict enough, they will do the same. Jaina's heart was a little cold.
If the requirements were so high, then at least 10,000 tons at a time. In order to avoid loss, at least 13,000 tons would be safe.
This way, the transportation costs would obviously skyrocket. Chapter 1103. Then those who are interested in the ores can pay Kultiras to build an ironworks in Theramore. The ores can be melted into metal ingots and shipped back. When Xueqi said this, Magni's eyes lit up. First of all, this would greatly reduce the pressure on transportation. At the same time, it would open the door for the Steel Stove Fort to join in. Secondly, developing mining in Theramore would give Theramore an industrial base. This made Theramore's position even more prominent. Jaina was very happy about this. After all, no matter how Kultiras rebuilt his land, he could only rely on shipping due to his geographical location. But Theramore was different. Xueqi's next words made the Alliance powerhouses understand what it meant to reveal the dagger. The broken roads in Dust Wallow Swamp are not suitable for transportation. When the time comes, Proudmoore can bring one of the chiefs there, and announce that a railway will be built from Theramore all the way to the border of the Barren Lands. Of course, if the Horde feels that it is too troublesome to rely on human and animal power in the future, the Alliance can also help the Horde build a railway through the entire Barren Lands. For free. Those who had not experienced the era of railway transportation would never understand how prosperous the transportation of goods, people, and culture would be after the railway was built. Although the teleportation portal could be reached in an instant, compared to the high mana consumption, only the railway was truly cheap and efficient. Ever since Xueqi started to promote the railway in the Alliance had completely changed in the past 20 years. This was especially so for Lordaeron. After Queen Kalia came to power, she forcefully pushed for the development of the railway. That was why Lordaeron was able to recover its vitality in just 4 years. If the Horde dared to bring the railway into the Barren Lands, it would be like putting the sword of Damocles on their necks. It would be fine if the Alliance and the Horde did not start a war. Once a war broke out, the core areas of the Horde would be destroyed. Even if peace was maintained, a railway to the border of the Barren Lands was a hidden and fatal noose that could be tightened at any time. After all, It was 100 times easier to build a railway on solid and barren land than to build a railway in a swamp filled with mud and mud. Once the most difficult part was settled, the rest would be easy.
Facing Duque's piercing gaze, Tyrande immediately realized that this was the Alliance's sneaky counterattack against the tribe's suppression of the Night Elves.
Duque's passionate gaze caused Tyrande's entire body to heat up, and she did not dare to meet his gaze. "All right, next up, Your Majesty Windrunner." Servanas, who was called out by Duque, was a little stunned. He nodded. "Is there anything I can do for you?" Duque's lips curled into a smile.
There's news that an Astrian, the traitor who shamelessly betrayed Quell Dorii and caused the old Silver Moon City and the Well of the Sun to suffer a catastrophe, is currently leading the remnants of his undead army to Winterspring.
Doesn't Sin Dorii have any thoughts about this? Servanas stood up abruptly. "The Alliance, please uphold justice for Sin Dorii and help him." Facing the map of the world of Azeroth that was laid out in the middle of the hall, Duque formed a long blue elemental line on his right index finger, pointing at the Azhara region in the northeast of the Kalimdor continent. Azhara has been the territory of the Night Elves since ancient times. It's also the area around the ancient Azhara city in the Ancient War. It's only right for Sin Dorii, a descendant of the High Elves, to reclaim this area. When Duque said this, everyone understood. That's right. To the Sin Dorii kingdom on the other side of the sea, Azhara was undoubtedly a troublesome enclave. But combining the two special meanings of an ancient legacy and the pursuit of a traitor, things became different. Moreover, if they developed the Azhara region and unearthed some ancient High Elven magic documents, the Sin Dorii mages would definitely be overjoyed. Duque turned his head.
"Lord Whisperwind, does the Night Elves have any objections to the Alliance's arrangement of Sin Dorii returning to Azhara?"
Tyrande thought for a moment. As long as Sin Dorii promises not to abuse arcane magic like their ancestors, the Night Elves have no objections. After all, our two races share the same roots. After all, in the future, the Night Elves, Blood Elves and High Elves would also unite again. Duque was happy to see this happen. Servanas raised his right hand.
"I swear in the name of the Queen of Sin Dorii that all magic experiments of Radiant Moon rank and above will be strictly supervised."
Then the Night Elves have no problems. Duque continued. "All right. The last and most important issue is regarding the Blackrock Orcs and Black Iron Dwarves who are active in the Scorching Gorge and Burning Steppes. Those black-skinned orcs should be hung to death." Magni took out his warhammer and waved it around. "I'm going to smash them again and again. Don't let me see them, or I'll aim my musket at their eye sockets and shoot each of them with a bullet." Duque's system elves gave him a rare reminder. As Magni's words were too crude, all sensitive words had been replaced with smash. It is strongly recommended that the host not listen to it. If you need a playback or translation, please click yes. Duque silently clicked no in his mind. The Dwarven War of the Three Hammers had passed many years ago. Although the Bronzebeard dwarves had reconciled with the Wildhammer dwarves, the Black Iron dwarves. Haha. The historical event of saving the dwarf princess had yet to happen. Duque felt a pain in the ass about this. He thought back to when he had accepted a quest in the game to save Magni's precious daughter, Princess Moira Bronzebeard. When he arrived at the scene, he found that he and his teammates had to endure the attacks of this silly princess who had Stockholm Syndrome and had fallen in love with her father's enemy, the Iron King Drogon Tharissen, to deal with the Iron King. All right. After the Black Iron King was taken care of, even more shocking information was revealed. Moira announced that she was pregnant with Drogon's child, and that she was in love with Drogon. Not only did she refuse to return to Iron Furnace Castle, she was also prepared to give birth to this child. The players were in a state of confusion. But, in order to unite the Three Hammers once again and form the Three Hammers Council, Duque very unkindly wished Magni well in his heart. Prepare to be a lord. Of course, Duque now looked completely unconcerned. After Magni had finished and calmed down, he said, "Things are far more troublesome than we thought. The latest information I received shows that the remnants of the Blackrock Orcs, the Black Iron Dwarves, and the Elemental Lord faction that escaped from the Battle of the Scorching Gorge all seem to be on the move." Chapter 1104. As usual, Duque was prepared to present the intelligence and convince the kings with evidence. However, this time, Duque was dumbfounded. Magni waved his short and muscular hand. Intelligence says.
Please, I've known you for 20 years, Xueqi. Anything you emphasize is definitely not a good thing. This stupid world was almost destroyed for the third time. Even if you tell me that the fourth apocalypse is coming, I won't be surprised at all. Just tell me, who is the boss of the enemy this time? How far do we have to go? Tell us and we'll do it. The dwarves liked to ignore the process and go straight to the result. The dwarves were known for being rough and direct. He didn't expect the other kings and bosses to all nod in agreement. The great craftsman Jurban wiped his small round glasses with a cloth and absent-mindedly agreed. Yes. Xueqi, just say it. Is it a local war or an all-out war? Tell us, let us have an idea, and it'll be easier to prepare firearms. Just give us a copy of your intelligence and speech, and we'll use it to fool the people below us. Yes. My Storm Warhammer is thirsting for it. Kudrin was also heckling. All of a sudden, the dwarves who needed to be convinced all raised their hands and feet and voted in favor. Xueqi's mouth turned into an O shape. He suddenly realized that the speech he prepared was useless. Looking around, his own queen didn't need to be convinced. They had already started to mobilize. The Dalajan's boss was Ronan, and he would definitely follow Xueqi's lead. Xueqi himself was the representative of Stormwind this time. All right, it's a unanimous vote. Xueqi didn't argue anymore. He directly walked to the military map, pressed his hands on the edge of the map table, and leaned forward. It was a posture like a tiger's roar. There are two factions of enemies. One is the remnants of the Black Dragons, Prince Nefarian and Princess Onyxia. Right now, Nefarian is controlling the Blackrock Orcs and a large number of Draconians and Draconians occupying the upper and lower levels of the Blackrock Tower. The other faction is... Xueqi raised his right hand with his palm facing the sky. Suddenly, an illusion of a fire giant with an inverted triangular upper body and a flaming hammer appeared. During the era of the Dark Empire, which was even older than the Ancient Era, there was a fire elemental lord, Ragnaros, who occupied the southeastern part of the ancient Kalimdor continent. He single-handedly turned the ancient Reedridge Mountains into the burning steppes of today. Damn it! It was this guy. Was it finally going to wake up? All right, if that's the case, we, the Bronzebeard dwarves, will take responsibility. Magni stood up abruptly. Kudrin had the same reaction. Count the Wild Hammer dwarves in. At the end of the day, it was all because of the War of the Three Hammers that Ragnaros, who followed the ancient gods, appeared in this world. Emperor Thorissen had lost, but he wanted to rely on summoning to make a comeback, which resulted in him summoning the Flame Demon King. Not only did he die, even his dark iron dwarves had become slaves. Xueqi said loudly. In fact, Ragnaros showed signs of recovery in the final battle of the Second Dark Portal. At that time, the fire elemental giant Baron Geddon appeared. I think everyone still has an impression of him. The big shots of the Alliance who had experienced the Second Dark Portal nodded. So, our worst-case scenario is that the Black Dragons and the Fire Elementals attack us at the same time. Queen Sylvanas said, can't we let the Dragon Sleep Temple deal with the Black Dragons? It would have been better if Queen Sylvanas hadn't mentioned it, but after she did, Xueqi was also angry. As one of the witnesses of history, he finally knew why the Black Dragons were so arrogant that no dragon came to deal with them. In fact, after I returned from the River of Time, I went to find Nozdormu and also to the Dragon Sleep Temple. Everyone, do you know why there was no news of the Burning Legion on planet Azeroth after the death of Archimonde, one of their two commanders?
It can't be that they were afraid, right? Kalia said. Xueqi sighed.
Of course not. The Burning Legion relied on the fact that as long as the demons didn't die in the Twisting Nether, they could resurrect indefinitely. Now, there are over 10,000 demons coming to the atmosphere of planet Azeroth every day to cause trouble. Anyway, the 4 major dragon races are very busy now.
Atmosphere? Are you referring to above the clouds? Kudrin asked.
You can say that. The atmosphere also includes low-level clouds, but the place where the dragons and demons fight is higher, where there is no air. Can we only rely on the power of us mortals?
Ronan touched his beard. Xueqi corrected.
If it was the Blackrock Orcs and the Iron Dwarves, then the mortal army can still deal with them. But the most important thing now is to organize an elite team of extraordinaires to go deep into the Blackrock Mountain called the Molten Core and deal with the Fire Elemental King inside. If possible, we can deal with Nefarian at the top of the Blackrock Tower.
You seem to have missed a target. Jaina frowned. Duque smiled. No, I didn't miss it. The next plan is the key. At the beginning of January, the Alliance Conference came up with a series of new policies. It involved various aspects. Diplomatically, the Night Elves joined the Alliance and reached an agreement with the Horde. Militarily, the Alliance announced that in May and October, to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the Alliance, there would be a military parade in Stormwind City, which was the center of the First War against the Dark Portal, and Lordaeron, which established the Alliance. In terms of internal affairs, apart from a package of policies aimed at strengthening trade and cultural exchanges within the Alliance, the most attractive thing was that from February onwards, a grand festival would be held almost every other month to celebrate the 20th anniversary. February 14th, Valentine's Day. May 7th, Children's Week. June 21st, Midsummer Day. September 20th, Brewfest. When the news spread, the entire Eastern Kingdom was in an uproar as the people spread the news. It was no wonder that the people reacted so enthusiastically. After all, the Eastern Kingdom had been in turmoil for the past 20 years. The 3 wars against the Dark Portal basically plowed the entire Eastern Kingdom back and forth. Many people fled from Stormwind to Lordaeron, and from Lordaeron back to Stormwind, crossing 2 continents in a single round trip. Especially Arthas' inhumane undead legion, it sent chills down the spine of the people. Although the Scourge army had been completely wiped out from Lordaeron, the occasional massacre of villages by the followers of the Church of the Damned still served as a disguised reminder to the people of the terrifying existence. Until now, many people were still worried about the return of the Lich King. It could be said that as long as Arthas and Nazul were not destroyed by the Holy Light, the people who had experienced the Scourge of the Undead would not be able to sleep well. Now that the Alliance announced a series of festivals, it could more or less dilute the fear and sorrow in the hearts of the people. Chapter 1105. On the 5th of January, in Stormwind City, Countess Enristo's mansion, Princess Onyxia threw the thick stack of intelligence reports onto the ground. Haha. It seems like we've been underestimated. I was expecting something from this Duke Marcus who murdered our father. Unfortunately, pretending to have a military parade and then besieging the Blackrock Tower? What a boring move. The one who spoke was a black-haired human man with a flaming crown on his head leaning against the wall. Unfortunately, his appearance was similar to that of the Lord of Presto back then. Anyone who had seen the human form of Nesario would quickly associate him with the Black Dragon clan. He was naturally Nesario's eldest son, Nefarian. Onyxia elegantly took a sip of the red wine in the glass. A drop of bright red wine flowed down the corner of her lips, making the black-haired dragon beauty look extremely flirtatious. Heh! My brother, are you planning to let those filthy orcs attack Stormwind City or the Iron Furnace Castle in advance? Or is your trump card Ragnaros, who is under your nest? The Blackrock orcs are just a bunch of slaves and watchdogs. As for the King of Flames, I hate communicating with such violent fellows because they can't be talked to properly. Nefarian shrugged helplessly. Oh, in the end, you still choose to trust your toys? Onyxia did not hide the sarcasm on her face. Humph. Those precious experimental subjects will be the greatest support for me to rule over this land in the future. Onyxia interrupted Nefarian before he could finish his sentence. Ha ha ha. What a joke. Your inferior toys might not even be enough to deal with the weak humans, and you still want to deal with the dragon army of the Dragon Slumber Shrine? Nefarian's face turned green. Stupid sister. You don't understand the greatness of science. Instead, you've been staying in the human territory. Aren't you afraid of being discovered and surrounded? Ha 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 ha. Onyxia laughed again with an enchanting and evil tone. The 4 Dragon Kings are not here. Who can stop me? Not to mention, if they really angered me, I would burn down Stormwind City and kill their King William and Prince Anduin. Then, I would find a chance to kill that Duke Marcus. When that time comes, let Stormwind fall into disunity and chaos. Humph. Arrogance and confidence were 2 different things. Since mortals could kill Archimonde, then our demigod bodies might not be that reliable. Be careful, my sister. I don't want to see your head hanging in Stormwind City's King's Valley next time. You're the one. Just don't let the Fire Demon King burn you. The 2 siblings parted on bad terms. That's right. Although the Black Dragons were individually very strong, Their selfish characteristics made it very rare for them to be wholeheartedly devoted to the outside world. Even though they were siblings, they each had their own standpoints. The Black Dragon siblings did not know that thousands of meters away, the youngest of the Windrunner sisters, Lilith, had activated dragon tracking and easily sensed Nefarian's arrival and departure. As expected, Lilith sighed softly and then disappeared into the night. On the 6th of January, in the Feralas region in the southwest of the Kalimdor continent, a bloody and exciting gladiatorial tournament was about to be held in the arena of the Hammer of Misfortune. Unlike the original history, the gladiatorial tournament had disappeared from the Eastern Kingdom because of the destruction of the Lordaeron Kingdom. But now, because of Queen Kalia's benevolence, she hated this kind of cruel and bloody killing, and cancelled the gladiatorial tournament in the Eastern Kingdom. Where there was demand, there would be a market. Perhaps it was because after the Second Battle of the Dark Portal, the orcs had been slaves for more than 10 years that the gladiatorial tournament became popular among the orcs. Slaves from all over the world were sent to the Hammer of Misfortune in Feralas. They were forced to duel with each other, or fight against all kinds of dangerous creatures. Of course, there were also orcs who boasted of their bravery who volunteered to participate in the gladiatorial tournament. This was the only chance for them to legally kill humans in an environment where their chief, Sal, strictly forbade harming people from the Alliance. Similarly, investors from all over the world who pursued excitement traveled thousands of miles, and even crossed the ocean to come here, just to watch the most exciting gladiatorial tournament. On this day, at the highest level of the Hammer of Misfortune's arena, there was a new pair of guests in the VIP suite named Dawn. One had to know that this was not an ordinary VIP suite. Just the cost of the suite for a day was as high as 10,000 Arathor gold coins. When the mysterious owner of the Hammer of Misfortune first set up this suite, he did not expect anyone to be so rich that they could afford the astronomical amount of 10,000 Arathor gold coins a day. This was more like a sky-high price, all for the sake of promoting the second-class Radiant Moon suite. Who would have thought that today, a mysterious investor would appear? Cash payment. No credit allowed. Originally, when the goblin in charge of receiving the guests heard the request, he was already prepared to mock this mysterious tycoon who overestimated himself. He even called for the two-headed ogre behind him, who only had one head left, to come forward. This was because he had never thought that someone would pay for this. From behind the investor, an attendant walked up and opened the space bag without saying a word. Crash! With a crisp sound, a sea of gold coins that could not even be loaded into a carriage poured out in front of the goblin in charge of receiving the guests. The attendant only said one sentence. My master said that if there's more, consider it a tip. After saying that, the mysterious sugar daddy, who was the leader, grabbed the blonde masked dancer and walked past the goblin receptionist in a dignified manner. It had to be said that the Dawn VIP suite had some quality. The windows of the suite were made with the latest one-way glass technology from the Iron Stove Fort. When outsiders looked in, it was a field of reflection. In the middle of the suite was a red velvet chair that looked like a large bed. It was very warm and comfortable to sit on. There were 2 stoves on the left and right sides of the room. Outside the room, there were 2 dedicated human attendants adding firewood to the stoves. There were a few ropes hanging from the ceiling in the middle of the room, each corresponding to a service. With a pull, a specific bell would ring, and dedicated attendants would immediately come in to serve the guests. The suite was divided into 2 entrances. The one near the arena was naturally for the distinguished guests. Outside was the lounge for the guards and maids that the guests had brought. Just as he entered the suite and lay down on the chair, the mysterious investor cast a spell to isolate himself from the outside world, and then revealed his true appearance. Yes, he was Xueqi. Yo, Jaina, since the main character hasn't appeared yet, do you want to practice alchemy with your master? Chapter 1106. Jaina had already become good friends with Alucia, so of course, Jaina knew what human alchemy was and what ORZ posture was. They were all the same thing. Xueqi, you bastard. You told me that you have official business that concerns the future of the Alliance. That's why I put down Theramore and came with you, but you tell me this the moment you arrive. Jaina seemed to be angry as she removed her veil. That's right. Isn't it related to the future of the Alliance that we're here to see how William is doing? Aren't you very close to him? We came early, and he hasn't gone on stage yet. We're afraid that we'll miss the show if we're too late. Am I to blame? Xueqi spread his palms and changed the topic. Speaking of which, alchemy? Jaina's expression changed instantly. She was born a princess and had received the strictest etiquette education since she was young. Normally, she wouldn't be willing to do that. But Jaina suddenly realized that she and Xueqi had been apart more often than not over the past few years. Xueqi had either been blasted into the void or met with an accident and was stuck in the river of time. The first time was 10 years, and the second time was 4 years.
A great hero with an indomitable spirit naturally had to shoulder the fate of the entire human race and even the entire world.
She naturally couldn't be such a petty woman and ask Xueqi not to save the world and not to do those dangerous things. It was obvious that a new crisis was approaching, and no one knew if they would be able to get through it this time. Especially when they would have to enter the molten core that was like a fiery hell. She didn't even dare to imagine the horrifying scene of Xueqi or one of her familiar comrades being burnt to a crisp by the flames.
Bastard master, how much do you want me to do?
Jaina murmured to express her anger, but in the end, she put aside her reservations and said, I'm doing this on account of the fact that I haven't had many days alone with you over the past few years.
Xueqi also knew that he had let down any of the women in the harem.
He shouldn't have been such a bastard.
However, even if he did not go out of his way to pursue them, as they got to know each other better, Jaina, Kalia, Elucia and Tyrant, who were originally famous beauties in history, started to pursue him, or perhaps because of a freak combination of factors, he unknowingly fell deeper into love with them. By the time he came back to his senses, there were already 7 women in the harem. In the face of Jaina's anger and complaints, Xueqi could only shamelessly go up to her and kiss her.
I know the war is coming. I'm just looking for an excuse to be alone with you.
Humph.
At least you have me in your heart.
The evil Mr. Du became even more aggressive.
Since you are pretending to be a dancer today, why don't you dance first? Jaina felt like strangling Xueqi to death. You're not jumping.
In the face of Xueqi's questions, Jaina felt her body heat up.
Damn it! I really don't know what I owed you in my previous life to be bullied by you like this in this life. Jaina grumbled. She was afraid that it would not be safe, so she quickly closed the curtains.
Then, she gently raised her hands at a beautiful angle, and her slender and fair feet began to dance.
That sexy waist that drove countless men crazy began to twist like a water snake.
Mr. Du's mouth began to dry up. Half an hour later, the voice of the MC sounded.
Ladies and gentlemen, today, we will welcome an earth-shattering battle that can be called the Battle of the Century. The two sides are the challengers, the Night Elf Druid Brawl Bearmantle, the High Elf Thief Valilla Sagunnar, and the dual sword-wielding warrior, Unnamed. Their opponent is the defending champion of the Hammer of Misfortune. Over here.
Xueqi, are you not done yet?
The battle is about to start. Alchemy is just a little bit away. Wait. I'll be done soon.
Xueqi's godly sword flashed, and the light of his sword flashed as he attacked Jaina.
Boo-hoo. A few minutes later Jaina, who had finally completed the alchemy ritual, quickly tidied up her clothes. However, she realized that she did not even have the strength to stand up. She could only lean against Xueqi on the recliner and look into the arena. One had to admit that the design of this super VIP room was really great. In the VIP room on the 5th floor, one could see everything in the arena from the recliner and look down through the floor-to-ceiling glass. Coupled with the room's field of vision magnification, one's field of vision could be magnified by up to 10 times as long as one pointed at a certain place. Enjoying the embrace of her lover from behind, Jaina suddenly felt a warm sense of happiness and security. Looking at the 6 people in the arena, Jaina could not help but look at the black-haired young warrior with a scar on his face. Jaina and William had known each other for a long time. It was the first year of the Dark Portal, and Stormwind City had just fallen. Due to their age, William, who was a few years younger than her, preferred to follow Arthas, who was like an adult, and was only acquainted with her. At that time, although William pretended to be strong, there was still a hint of weakness and fear in his bones. Now, this impression was completely subverted.
It was still the same familiar facial contour, but the delicate face that used to be like a little fresh meat had become more defined and defined during these days of life and death.
The scar on his face, which was said to have been caused by lightning in the arena, added to his manly charm. There was also his beastly, wolf-like eyes. Just looking into them would make one feel as if they would be torn into pieces in the next moment. Ah, I seem to understand why you didn't rescue William directly, and instead wanted him to continue his training. I know. I'm a considerate elder. Duque played with Jaina's Mount Hyjal fondly. Hey, master, aren't you afraid that William will really slip up and get killed? Duque stopped and hugged Jaina's waist instead. I'm afraid. But I'm more afraid that William will grow into a useless person. In this increasingly chaotic era, every kingdom needed a wise leader. A useless king would only lead a kingdom to destruction. Moreover, I've seen fragments of William's future in the River of Time. Is fate unchangeable? Jaina's voice was almost a whisper. No. Fate has changed a lot, and it will change any time in the future. But I have to take the gamble. Only then will I be worthy of His Majesty Lang Rin's nurturing and trust. Just like how I treated you in the beginning, I know that His Majesty De Lin only wants you to be a good duchess or queen, but I feel that it would be a great waste of your talent and ability. So I didn't treat you like a canary in a cage, and instead sent you out to Theramore. Look, aren't you living a very fulfilling life now? Thank you, Duque, I love you. Jaina stretched her neck and turned her head to give Duque a passionate kiss. Chapter 1107. In the arena, the battle had begun. To the public, William, who was a nameless person, was the first to launch a charge at the defending champion. William's charge was very unique. Normally, a warrior's charge would lock onto a target, and then use the warrior's unique fury ability to charge towards that target. However, halfway through his charge, William used his extraordinary senses to detect the orc sword sage who was in a state of stealth. He immediately switched to intercept and charged towards him. Bam! It was a clash of flesh against flesh, and strength against strength. It was a clash without any fancy moves. William, who was waving his swords, not only knocked the orc sword sage out of stealth, but he also used hamstring break in one go. Well done! During the days that William had been a slave gladiator, his fellow gladiator partner, the high elf bandit Valilla Sagunnar, suddenly jumped out of stealth. She raised her hands, and the two daggers in her hands that emitted a scarlet aura were already waving at the back of the orc shaman, who was the healer at a speed that was hard to see with the naked eye. Sneak attack. Backstab. Cleave. 5-star eviscerate. If one were to look at the sequence of attacks, Valilla was undoubtedly the worst bandit. That was because she only cared about dealing damage, and had forgotten to control the enemy's healer. If one were to consider her shocking attack frequency of 5 skills in a second, as well as her extremely efficient use of energy, that was impossible for ordinary bandits, it was not difficult to understand her choice. While William was still fighting with the sword sage, while their druid bearskin was still transforming into a bear and fighting with the opponent's warrior, the defending champion's healer, the shaman, was already dead on the ground in just 3 seconds. Baylor. Healer. I need. The orc sword sage was suffering from William's suppression. He had seen powerful warriors, as well as warriors who were fast and agile, but he had never seen a powerhouse like William, who had such a perfect combination of strength, speed, and agility. William brandished his swords and created a sword net that resembled a torrential storm. He had the insane speed of a violent warrior and the dexterity of a weapon warrior. What was more frightening was that the sword sage realized that William's parrying skills were equally proficient in the few times he counterattacked. The sword sage was on the verge of breaking down. He realized that he was dealing with a super monster that was proficient in all 3 elements: berserk, weapon, and defense. However, this monster had a stronger fighting spirit than the orcs. Unsurprisingly, the beastman's sword saint only lived 2 seconds longer than his shaman companion before following in his companion's footsteps. Ashes to ashes. Dust to dust. Vale Era firmly believed that William would be able to kill the sword sage. Hence, after dealing with the shaman, she dashed towards the remaining orc warrior. Unexpectedly, Brol Bearmantle, a druid who specialized in the wild, was suppressed by the orc warrior. The orc's blood-red battle axe had some kind of evil special effect that absorbed the enemy's life force. The sharp axe would always be able to break through the tough skin of the druid who had turned into a bear, and cause considerable damage to Brol. The orc warrior realized that he couldn't catch up to William and Vale Era, so he killed Brol with a series of moves. After Vale Era became invisible, she activated Sprint and dashed over, using sneak attack on the orc warrior. However, the effect wasn't very good. The opponent was immune to a large number of control skills in his berserk state. What was worse was that the opponent switched positions in the next instant, and continued to chase after Brol while activating counterstorm. This made Vale Era feel like a mouse trying to pull a tortoise. I'll do it. At this moment, William descended from the sky like a god. He used a gorgeous leap slash to teach the orc warrior a lesson. The orc warrior, who couldn't take the opportunity to kill Brol in an instant, was forced to a dead end in a 3-on-1 situation. As expected, when Vale Era used the 5-star kidney strike and stabbed the orc warrior in the back, the orc warrior's body was instantly destroyed. That was a kidney. A man's most important internal organ. Just like that, the orc warrior was torn into pieces by the bloody and brutal Vale Era. Of course, there was no need to mourn for this. Just as the orc warrior was paralyzed on the spot from the pain and paralysis, William's 2 long swords formed a cross and pierced the arteries and veins in the orc's neck. In the next second, he waved his 2 swords, and a green head the size of a basket flew into the sky. The battle was over. The MC's roar reverberated through the entire arena through a sound amplification spell. A new champion has been born. Let us congratulate them. Now, this black-haired young man has led his team to become the champion of the Hammer of Doom Arena. He has obtained the great title of Ghost Wolf. That's right. This nameless human powerhouse, from this moment onwards, his name is the great Logosh. 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 The audience went crazy, especially those who had bet on William's team, who had won. They held onto the tickets in their hands tightly, waved their fists and screamed. In the VIP room, Jaina looked surprised. The title of Ghost Wolf. This time, William is going to be famous all over the world. Xueqi hugged Jaina and smiled. In the past, the current chief of the tribe, Thrall, was also a famous champion gladiator in Lordaeron. Now, William has also obtained the title of champion gladiator. Don't you think it's very funny? Hey, Xueqi, why do you have to groom William? It's actually quite good for you to be the leader of the alliance. Jaina asked a question that had been hidden in her heart for a long time. Xueqi shook his head. I groom William, just like how Lothar groomed me. There is no conflict between us. I have wisdom, foresight, and powerful magic power. However, I still lack faith, a strong spirit and willpower. This is what I've been through. Furthermore, I don't know when I'll be forced to leave again. Don't you think that the alliance needs double insurance? Jaina stopped talking, and gently rubbed her smooth face against Xueqi's. Xueqi sighed in his heart. This couldn't be helped. This was inseparable from his experience of learning about animals before he was 20 years old. A good young man who had accepted materialism really couldn't accept idealism. He would never be able to have such a pure spirit of chivalry like the natives of Azeroth, nor would he run to believe in gods. The alliance needed at least 2 flags. One was practical, and the other was spiritual. Xueqi at least hoped that William would become a benchmark for the spirit of chivalry after he grew up. Chapter 1108. We've won. Haha. Vala put her arm around William's shoulder without hesitation, happily drinking the wine that they normally wouldn't see. That was a fine High Elves wine from the Quell de la Serra. Now that Sin Dorii was being rebuilt, the supply of all luxury goods was suspended, so this fine wine called Sadira could be said to be a rare treasure. We're the champions. Brawl was also very excited. He raised a large cup of nectar. Ever since he had been imprisoned as a gladiator slave, he had not tasted anything that fit the teachings of the Druids for a long time. Every day, it was either hard black bread that could knock one's teeth off, or barbecued meat that tasted barbaric. Yes, it was leftovers from the previous night. Now that they were the champions, their damned master Ryga was finally treating them better. Yo, John Doe. Oh no, we should call you Rogosh now. My dear Rogosh, why are you still so sad? Is it because we haven't regained our freedom? Vala comforted William. It's okay. Ryga may be a bastard, but at least he supports us in making money. If we can defend our title in the next tournament, we'll have enough money to redeem ourselves. Yes, that's right. Brawl also comforted William. He even tugged on the kryptonite collar around his neck that symbolized his status as a slave. Their current master, Ryga Earthfury, was born in Draenor. When he was young, his clan was wiped out by the ogres during the war. Ryga was captured and trained as a warrior. As a powerful warrior, Ryga and the Orc army passed through the Black Gate and participated in the invasion of Azeroth. He was eventually captured. After escaping from the captive camp, he became a gladiator, and after earning money to redeem himself, he became a slave owner. He used his savings to purchase an Orc warrior from the Blackrock clan, Blood-Eye Redfist, a Night Elf druid, Brawl Baremantle, and theoretically a Blood Elf thief, Valilla Sanguiner. They were active in famous arenas such as the Hammer of Misfortune and the Ring of Blood. After Blood-Eye died in battle, he began to look for a new gladiator. Thus, he picked up William, who was unconscious on the beach of Duroder. Faced with his companion's consolation, William smiled bitterly. "No, I'm not in the least worried about freedom. I'm just still confused. Even though I won the gladiatorial championship, I still can't remember who I am." Memory loss was a rather unsolvable problem, and Valera and Brawl did not have a good solution either. They could only console William. "You will have the chance to get your memories back in the future." At the same time, Rieger Earthfury was reveling in his private room. "Ha ha ha. Money. So much money. I knew that they would become my cash cow. Ha 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 ha."
Liga laughed wildly, dumping dozens of chests of gold coins on the floor of the room, rolling on the ground a few times before excitedly rushing to the bed and hugging a very beautiful Orc girl in his eyes. The Orc girl's clothes were half exposed, and her eyes were already flirtatious. Just as he was about to celebrate with the Orc girl, a terrible sound of destruction came from the wall behind him. Wha! It wasn't a loud sound, but the wall behind him was suddenly blasted open by the flames, and a 4-meter-tall, 3-meter-wide door appeared. It wasn't an explosion, but an ultra-high-temperature flame that instantly burned the wall made of hard granite into ashes. Only dust and some glass-like melts were left on the ground. A beautiful black-haired female thief and an equally beautiful radiant moon elven wizard entered. They were obviously very powerful, but they wore maid uniforms and walked through the door first. When the female elven wizard walked past, a visible frost aura spread rapidly on the ground, extinguishing the heat wave brought about by the flames in an instant. Then, she used the frost elements to condense a dazzling white carpet on the ground. They were carrying magic lanterns that were gold and red that were not sold on the market, and were obviously from the royal family of Kuel Salas. They stood on the left and right sides of the room. Then, a young human man in a blue and white mage robe walked into the room with a blonde human mage wearing a crown and the same blue and white robe. "Hello. I'm Duque. I'm Duke Marcus. Next to me is Queen Jaina Proudmoore." Actually, Liga could recognize Duque even if he didn't introduce himself. As an old warrior who had experienced the first and second battles at the Dark Portal and fought against Duque many times, Liga would recognize Duque's demon-like face that had sent millions of orcs to hell. Pushing away the orc woman in his arms who was so frightened that she couldn't speak, Liga rolled off the bed pathetically and knelt on the spot. He was no longer the brave and fearless warrior of the past. His previous life as a captive and a gladiator had taught him what respect and obedience was. Duke Marcus was recognized by both the Alliance and the Horde as the strongest person in the Alliance. He was the commander of the Alliance, the Storm Duke, and a man with power that could overturn the world. Why would such a man come here to find a small slave master like him? At this thought, Liga suddenly remembered the amnesiac young warrior who had just made a lot of money for him. "Do you know who you've imprisoned and used as a slave gladiator?" "I don't know." Liga knelt on the ground, shaking his head non-stop. He had guessed a little, but he definitely couldn't admit it, because once he did, he would definitely die. "Garrosh is the king of the Stormwind Kingdom, Varian Rin, whom I serve." As the angry voice fell, Liga was sent flying by a powerful arcane impact, and he was imprinted on the wall. The surging bluish-purple magic was like a solid substance, suppressing him as if it wanted to press his whole body into the granite wall. "No. Spare me. Spare me." Liga was in a difficult situation. He never would have thought that his money tree was a big pit. He had actually picked up a king to be his slave. It was fine if he was a slave. If he hadn't been discovered and was secretly sent back, it would have been a great achievement. Now everything was over. The strongest mortal in the world, Duke Marcus, had come to find him. Liga was so scared that he almost T himself. Just when he thought he was going to die for sure, the magic that was pouring into his body suddenly disappeared. Duque's voice rang in his ears again. "You should go to hell without a doubt. But seeing that you've made Varian grow to my surprise, I'll give you one last chance.
I need you to put on a show for me. Chapter 1109. As the owner of the arena, he naturally hoped that the gladiatorial matches would not stop throughout the year, but it was obvious that this was impossible. Rich people could not possibly stay here 365 days a year. Similarly, gladiators would also have injuries and need to rest. Magic could temporarily heal wounds, but it was impossible to replenish lost blood or repair deeper injuries. Most wounds could only be healed with time. Staying in a place like Pharaoh's that was filled with blood and violence would only prevent the gladiators from getting enough rest. Hence, according to the rules of the Hammer of Misfortune, the remaining gladiators would be sent somewhere to recuperate after the final gladiator champions emerged every winter. As a famous slave owner of the arena, Liga was very close to the Torrens of Thunder Cliff. Hence, after this season's gladiatorial matches ended, he would send his victorious teams to Thunder Cliff as usual. These are magic shackles. Apart from preventing you from leaving the carriage, you can maintain a certain amount of freedom, Liga instructed before he left. In the spacious carriage, William, Valilla, and Brawl could get almost any delicacy they wanted. During the journey, as long as they had a request, they just had to instruct the escorts, and someone would rush over to fulfill it. This was because behind their chariot, which looked like an Azeroth version of a cash carrier, there were two other chariots, both filled with food and drinks. Brawl Bearskin took a sip of nectar. What a pity! This isn't true freedom. Valilla's eyes flickered, and she waved the magic shackles on her wrists. Liga won't give us a chance. These are top-grade magic shackles. Unless the two legendary Breaking Dawn archmages, Duque and Ronin, ordinary Radiant Moon wizards can't break them by force. Sigh, we're his cash cow. Let's think about how we're going to defend our title next year. Duque.
William shuddered when he heard this name. He felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. He raised his head abruptly. Vale Era, say the names of those two Breaking Dawn wizards again.
Ronin.
No. The former one. William was extremely nervous.
Duque. The strongest human wizard. Breaking Dawn Archmage Duke Marcus. What's wrong? Lagash? Heavens! I remember this name. That's right. I have a very deep impression of this name.
Varian covered his head with both hands. Of course, we all have an impression of him because he was a legendary hero and commander of the Alliance, even though he went missing.
Brawl said. No, the latest news is that he has just returned, at the end of December.
As a thief, Valera's ears were sharper, but I don't think Duque's return will affect our fate in any way, so I didn't say anything.
Brawl nodded in agreement at Valera's words. No. That's not it. That Duque and I aren't strangers who look up to each other but don't know each other. My heart told me that I knew him. I have a very close relationship with Duke Marcus. That's right. He was above his friends. Oh, my son's Christian name is also Duque. Wait a minute. My son? I have a son.
The throbbing that came from the deepest part of his soul triggered a certain nerve in William.
He was like a traveler who was about to die of thirst in the desert, suddenly grasping his last hope.
That was an oasis in his soul that could save him.
Even after so many years of hard work as a gladiator, the battles between life and death did not destroy him. It was because William longed to be able to recover his memories and find his life. This was the only pillar of support he had when he was in the most pain and lost.
Now, it was as if he had unraveled the fog and found his direction. How could William not be overjoyed?
You have a son. Vale Era and Brawl were shocked at the same time, then overjoyed. Have you recovered your memories?
Vale Era asked in surprise.
No,
William was at a loss again, but his intuition, which had been honed from countless battles in the gladiator arena, felt that his judgment was not wrong.
I didn't recall everything, but I feel that after I find that Duke Marcus, I will remember more things. It's not difficult to find him.
He's the Grand Duke of Stormwind. Vale Era was only halfway through her sentence when William was touched again.
Stormwind City. Yes, I remember something again. I remember Stormwind City. It's a city of alternating blue and white. My God, tell me about Stormwind City. Night Elf Brawl was completely clueless about Stormwind City, but Vale Era was different. She could be considered a blood elf. After Arthas destroyed Kuel Salis and polluted the sun well, She was ostracized by her people because she could barely belong to Prince Kale, that's faction. In addition, the entire Long Song forest was in a mess. Vale, who had lost confidence in her hometown, began her wandering life, which was why she was caught and became a slave gladiator. Before that, if there were any major events in the High Elf society that would not change for thousands of years, the biggest would be Xueqi seducing the Ranger General Aurelia. From then on, Xueqi, who was a human duke from the southernmost part of the continent, Stormwind, entered the sights of the High Elves. Vale knew a lot about Stormwind City. As she explained, William's eyes lit up. Then, the Iron Triangle of the Gladiator Arena decided on an escape plan. They were prepared to find a way to escape to the only human territory on this continent, Theramore. Finally, they would find a way to find a ship that was willing to ferry them back to Stormwind City. They waited for 4 whole days before they found an opportunity. The Feralaz region could not directly reach Mogor's Thundercliff. The safer way was to go east through the Thousand Needles, then north to the southern part of the Barren Lands, and finally west to the peaceful and lush Mogor region. In the Thousand Needle Forest, Brawl thought of a way to attract a large pack of wolves, and very coincidentally, he also accidentally attracted an even more powerful rare elite wyvern Hatras. While the guards were in chaos, William forcefully smashed the magical formation on the roof of the carriage with his sword despite the recoil of his magic. Fortunately, the magic formation had not been repaired for a long time, so the backlash was not too strong. Otherwise, William's right arm would have been blown off. On a stone pillar in the Thousand Needles that looked like a tall tower, Duke and Jaina quietly watched the trio who had snatched 3 horses and charged forward, killing their way through the forest and leaving a trail of blood behind them. "Why did you go through so much trouble?" Jaina asked. "Young people. Only when you fight for it with your life will you learn to cherish it." Chapter 11:10. Indeed. I can take William back directly and activate the next step of the plan to let William recover as soon as possible. If I can deal with the Black Dragon Princess, then the result will be that the great hero of the Alliance, Duke Marcus, has once again foiled the evil plot. Let's refresh my reputation that can't be upgraded. I've proven myself again, but what about Varian? Gianna was suddenly speechless. Yes. What about William? Perhaps from now on, William would become the cowardly person in the eyes of the people, the little king who couldn't even protect himself and needed the help of the older generation, Xueqi. The people might say, "Ah, at the crucial moment, Sir Marcus is still reliable." Then what? Would William, who was already in his 20s, once again play the role of the weak person who was protected under the wings of Xueqi and the other seniors? Xueqi continued to explain his point of view. History has proven to us time and time again that having a great teacher alone is not enough to produce a truly outstanding student. Take Arthas for example. Back then, he learned from Uther, the greatest paladin in the entire alliance. However, he, who had never experienced any setbacks and tribulations, was tempted by evil because of his stubbornness and prejudice. He made mistakes step by step, which led to the complete fall of his soul. At the end of the day, it was because he had never suffered before. His path had been too smooth. Gianna fell silent at the mention of Arthas. Gianna had once looked forward to meeting Arthas. But fate had missed them, so they were only childhood friends. Even so, Arthas's fall still touched her greatly. She chose to listen quietly. A person cannot be tempered by good times. Blindly protecting him is actually harming him and not really doing it for his own good. Xueqi sighed. Facing the Calamity army that can expand its army infinitely, the foundation of the Alliance is still too weak. It can't withstand any torment. We can't even give William a few thousand soldiers to torment. At most, we can let him feel the atmosphere of the battlefield. That's already the limit. I've secretly checked. William is now in a strange state where his soul is split, but his body is being duplicated and split into 2. It was rare that in this state, he could cast aside the aura of a king and experience life and death as an ordinary person. He could experience what friendship was, and he could taste the things that he could not learn while sitting on the throne. How could I possibly interrupt his growth? If he can recover, this rare gladiator experience will become one of the most precious treasures in his life. Vale and Brawl would also become his most capable helpers in overcoming the obstacles in the future. This is also the best training for William that I can do for Lang and Anduin. Xueqi's words shook Jaina to the core. She had never thought that Xueqi would put so much thought into it.
It could be said that it was because of Anduin Lothar and Lang Rin's trust that Xueqi could rise like a comet and become the brightest star in the sky. Along the way, Xueqi, who had achieved success and almost controlled the entire alliance, did not abandon Stormwind, which had nurtured him. Instead, he used this roundabout method to nurture a better and more outstanding king for Stormwind. Putting oneself in someone else's shoes, one should repay kindness with kindness. Indeed, this is the Xueqi that I'm infatuated with. Jaina's heart was a little infatuated. Unfortunately, she and Xueqi were not the only ones here at the moment. Xueqi's words were not for her to hear. 5 meters behind Xueqi, a figure bowed to Xueqi and said, "I admire your foresight and effort, Grand Duke.
I will convey your words to Regent for Dragon. Matthias Shaw, you just have to be careful not to let irrelevant people enter His Majesty Varian's trial field. Keep a distance of at least half a day from them. And pay special attention to Valilla Sagunnar. Her skills are not inferior to yours." Matthias was the head of Storm City's MI7, and the head of intelligence that had been deeply trusted by the Storm royal family ever since King Lang. This time, it was he who had been sent by Bolivar to oversee the affair. On the surface, he reported directly to Bolivar, but someone as smart as Matthias, of course, knew who the real boss of Storm City was. In front of Xueqi. He also knew that he could not become Xueqi's confidant, but he still meticulously completed every order from Xueqi. This was good for him, for Bolivar, and for Stormwind. After bowing his head and agreeing, Matthias' figure disappeared into thin air. "Gianna, enough is enough with your acting. No king wants to be deceived or fooled. Once William arrives at Theramore, or if the people we sent to follow him are discovered, show yourself and tell William the truth."
"Understood. And after that?"
"After that, it's time to prepare the Valentine's Day plan." The Valentine's Day plan was, of course, a large-scale plan. If Xueqi did not say it, no one would have thought that Xueqi would do this. Of course, that was not Jaina's main point. "Humph. Back then, I thought that Valentine's Day was specially set up for me. You even made me wait for you for a full 10 years, from a young girl to an old lady." Jaina put her hands on her hips, looking angry. "Old lady? Where is that?"
The bastard Xueqi made a gesture of looking into the distance, pretending not to see.
"There is only an eternal beauty around me, the 18-year-old Queen Kurtiras who will not age." "What old lady? I really don't see her." If Jaina was really the old princess who had waited for Xueqi for more than 10 years and became an auntie, Jaina would probably really flip out. Life was eternal, and age no longer had any meaning. With eternal life, one's appearance and body would be fixed at the peak of the human body at 18 years old. In the end, their appearance was getting older and older. In the past few years, Jaina and Alucia even had to secretly put on makeup to make themselves look more mature. Perhaps, this was also a kind of blissful worry. He did not know how to continue lying in the future, but for the time being, Xueqi's remedial measures still made Jaina unable to be angry. After a gentle kiss, Jaina left. It was mid-January, and more news began to spread within the borders of Stormwind. After nearly 2 weeks of discussion among the nobles finally launched a counterattack against Duke under the leadership of Countess Katrana and Risto after Duke's promotion of the feudal lord's power. After several meetings with King Varian, who was sitting in Stormwind Fortress like a fool, the muddle-headed King Varian suddenly announced that the nobles' fiefs were sacred and inviolable. If he wanted to weaken the power of the vassals, it would be a challenge to his and the entire human world's royal authority. He hoped that Xueqi would retract his decision, or else he would have to consider Xueqi's Grand Duke status. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.